Excuse me. I'd like to call to order the Monday, January 27th, 2020 regular meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission. Can we please have the roll call?
Chair Rudnicki,
Here.
Vice Chair Schwarzbacher. Sorry.
Yeah, I do that all the time, too.
I do
Yes,
it every
I'm here.
time. I'm sorry.
So do I.
Commissioner Bolt,
Here.
Commissioner Coronado,
Here.
Commissioner Allman,
Here.
Commissioner Stallman,
Here.
and Commissioner Reynolds.
Here. And Dan is traveling en route back from Australia, so he's not here tonight. We do have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all rise. That's all right. Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, corrections, switching? Seeing a lot of head nodding, we'll proceed as written. Next up is approval of the minutes of our, let's see, ID 2044 certification of the January 13th, 2020 regular meeting minutes. You have the meeting, you have the minutes, and you also looked at the video. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move to approve based on the clerk's certification of the January 13, 2020 minutes of Littleton Planning Commission.
We have a second? Okay, Bruce has got the second. Any discussion? Please vote.
Wait.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Forgot how to do that. Just checking, Sherry, before you, okay.
It's been a while.
All right, next up is public comment. Our recording secretary mentioned if you might have signed up on the wrong sheet, the public comment is for speaking on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Our public hearing is the dog facility. The public comment is for other items that, again, are not on the agenda. If you wish to address the Planning Commission under public comment, please sign in. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The Planning Commission is not authorized by the Colorado Opens Meeting Law to discuss, comment, or take action at the meeting on any issue raised by public comment that is not part of tonight's agenda. The chair may refer the matter to staff to obtain additional information and report back to the commission as appropriate. We do have a sign-up list. I think a lot of you signed up for this, so we'll go through this. Amy, slide speakers.
All the slide speakers are for the dog.
Okay. There's a Don. Part of the slide dog. Okay. Krista. Okay. Trip Butler. And I think Sherry, the same thing? Okay. David? David Duke? Okay. Chris Duke? Same. Okay. Let's see. Steve Morris? Ben Burke? Okay. W. Donovan? Thank you. Duke, I'm not going to even pronounce. What's that? Severe. Signify by saying woof. Yeah, thank you. Leanne? And Chris?
That was the dog.
Okay. Matt Lehman? Okay. Paul? Going to the dogs. Okay. Megan Wilson? Whew. And we go to the back. Alan, handwriting I can't see. Touche something or other. Alan? Okay. Krista Forst?
I'm on the front side too.
Oh, okay. Jeremy Manning? Okay. And Josh Johnson? Okay. Is there anyone that hasn't signed up to wish to speak on general items? Please come forward. Again, you'll be limited to 3 minutes of speech. When you have 30 seconds left, the yellow card will be held up. When your 3 minutes are up, the red card will be held up. Go ahead.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Pam Chadbourne, and I may be the only person here who's been here before. I'm glad to see everybody, and I'm going to say something. I hope you come again. These people need witnesses, and I need you to be here to look them in the eye when they do things. So please, come back again. So I'm going to talk to you about the two things on the study session tonight. I'm not happy about either of them. The floodplain exceptions have not been a burden for the city. There is no need for efficiency except for developers who want a straight path to do whatever they want. This is not of benefit to Littleton. And you are the folks who need to say that's where the line is drawn. So look at the floodplains in the maps. They are natural wildlife corridors which should be preserved in our comp plan and in our code in the future because y'all are you're making the city more dense, very intentionally. Or actually you're leaving it up to the developers you're really just hands off. Let's let the developers do what they want and let them be dense. So we won't have a chance. You will take the chance from the planning commissions and councils and the people in the future to make these wildlife corridors, because once you build buildings on these pathways, they can't be taken back. So floodplain exception, there is no good reason for this. I'm sorry, but I've been to all the floodplain exceptions more than some of you. And it is not a burden on you. It gives the public visibility of construction that's going on, which is of interest to us. And again, this is a benefit to the city. Your charge, Planning Commission, is to do what's good for the people. So please consider this skeptically. The other thing I'm shocked to see, or actually I'm surprised to see, maybe sorry to see, is the proposals for design guideline changes, because there was a Historical Preservation Board meeting last Wednesday and it was not mentioned. And you know what? The floodplain exceptions and the design standards both affect the historic district here or historic structures. And they should hear these first. They believe that they have a seat at the table, and boy, did I just see a big miss. I'm going to say the next one is next month. It's delayed actually a week because of another holiday. They can have a special meeting if they need to, or a special study session. So I'm going to ask you, do not take action on either of these until you hear what Historical Preservation Board has to say and until they've been informed. And finally, I'm going to say, these are just a bunch of words, and these have got to be illustrated with real-life representative examples. Unless we see those, you should vote no. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing no hands, we'll move on. General business, we have none. We'll go on to our public hearing. This is PC Resolution 01-2020, recommending approval of the Second Amendment to the Highlands Square Oak Brook Commercial Center Site Development Plan /PD, which affects only Pad A of Parcel 1B, ADP 19-0001. Before we start, let me kind of give you an idea of what's going to happen. First, we're going to go up and down the line, talk about who's visited the site among planning commissioners. Have they talked to anyone? Next will be a staff presentation, and then questions of planning commission to the staff. Next will be the applicant's presentation, and then again, questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant. Next up, we will open to public comment. That's where you all signed up here. You'll have a chance to speak for your 3 minutes. Then we'll close the public comment. The applicant will have one last chance to respond to the public comment, and then we'll go to a motion and a vote. So, first up, PC, have you visited the site, and did you talk to anyone? Start with Jason.
Certainly. Ate at Three Margaritas several years ago and reviewed the site in Google Street View.
Yes, I visited the site last week and did not speak with anyone.
Visited the site, did not speak to anyone.
Visited the site over the weekend and did not talk to anyone.
I've been to the site as well, but I did not speak to anyone.
It's been a number of years since I've eaten at Trace Margaritas, but I did visit it over the weekend and didn't talk to anybody there.
I did visit the site, but I did not talk with anyone.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to staff presentation. And if you'll speak into that microphone as best you can. Oh, well, I've been asked to explain what we just went through. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and therefore, we're not supposed to talk to the public or to each other once an official application is made for the project. So that's the reason we are allowed to visit the site, but we're not allowed to speak to anyone at the site. Sometimes it's, in the past, I've visited sites and an interested neighbor will come and start chit-chatting, and you have to gently tell them, sorry, I cannot speak to you, because again, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and all the information we're supposed to get is from our packet that we get on Thursday and the evidence of the hearing tonight. So, is staff ready to go?
Yes, thank you.
And speak into the microphone.
All right, here we go. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Elizabeth K. Marchetti, and I am the City of Littleton Project Planner. With me this evening are Mr. Steve Morris, CFO of Hobnob Pet Care, and Ms. Carrie Showett, manager and owner of Hobnob Pet Care. Also here this evening are their authorized representative, Mr. Steve Brown, as well as Mr. Ben Seep, engineer from Wave Engineering, both of whom are prepared to answer any questions. No, page up. It's really slow. Okay. Staff is recommending approval of the request for an amendment to a general plan development plan for the building at Pad A of Parcel 1B, located at 501 East County Line Road. Oh my gosh. During this presentation, I will briefly explain the process and the application details. I'll provide a summary of my analysis of the application's compliance with approval criteria, make a recommendation, and request that the Commission take action this evening. This image is a copy of the approved Highland Square Oakbrook Commercial Center SDP-PD with Pad A circled in yellow within Parcel 1B, which is generally outlined in the red square. Amendments to the development standards of a general plan development plan are reviewed, and a recommendation is made by the Planning Commission to the City Council. Should the applicant decide to proceed after this evening's hearing, his request will be heard by the City Council. The next step for the applicant would be to request approval of a conditional use permit to allow for an animal boarding and care facility, which would include a site development plan. The plan would be reviewed concurrently with a conditional use permit, and the decision regarding its approval would be made by the Director of Community Development. The subject site is located at 501 East County Line Road, immediately north of County Line Road and west of Phillips Avenue. The commercial lot to the northwest is under construction right now, and a new animal hospital will operate there. The commercial business to the west is Haveli Indian Restaurant, and the business up the hill to the east is Wilmore Nursery. The site is located at the southeastern corner of the Oakbrook Safeway Shopping Center, which is partially zoned B2 and PD-C. Across Phillips Avenue is the Oakbrook subdivision, which is zoned R3. North of the shopping center is another commercial development zoned PDI. The existing building was constructed in 1996 and was sold to the applicant in 2019. The building was originally a Carrabba's Italian Grill, and more recently it has been a Three Margaritas. This is the proposed site plan for the one-story restaurant structure at 501 East County Line Road. The structure is on a 1.33-acre lot, also known as Lot 6, Block 1 of the Safeway Shopping Center Final Plat. The three changes being requested by this amendment are as follows. Number one, to allow the maximum building footprint to increase from 7,500 square feet to 8,267 square feet, an increase of 767 square feet. Number 2, allow the maximum building height to increase from 30 feet to 35 feet to allow only for an uninhabitable architectural tower element at the southwest corner of the building. And 3, allow for the permanent outdoor use of a dog play area, should the Planning Commission approve in the future a conditional use permit at this site for an animal boarding and care facility. Applicants for an amendment to a general planned development plan must show that they comply with both city policies and regulations. The location of the site, shown in the yellow circle in the bottom right corner, is within the south neighborhood. The proposed amendment would support the reuse of the structure for a different commercial purpose while taking advantage of existing utilities and transportation infrastructure without requiring demolition or reconstruction. The applicant makes a case that the proposed amendments align with city policy regarding sensitivity to neighbors and contributing to a sustainable economy while complying with city regulations. The proposed amendment would enable a new commercial business to begin operating quickly within an existing commercial center, thereby not requiring new land development. The proposed amendment would also allow for a new use in the shopping center by adaptively reusing an existing structure, which avoids the demolition of a commercial structure and the use of resources to build a new one. The increase in building footprint and in height to allow for the architectural tower element are reasonable responses to the existing conditions of the site. The restaurant is significantly below the grade elevation of both County Line Road and Phillips Avenue. Growing along the length of the retaining walls along both County Line and Phillips Avenue are lovely mature trees up to a height of 10 feet. The lower grade combined with the mature trees dramatically reduces the visibility of the building by passing motor vehicles. The building is set far enough away from adjacent users and its own lot lines that an expansion of the building footprint will have no negative impact on the commercial center or any existing or future neighbors. The proposed outdoor dog play area along the southeast side of the structure takes advantage of parking spaces that are expected to be unnecessary should an animal boarding and care facility begin operations. Using that space for business operations would be a more productive use of the land compared to unnecessary parking spaces. Another consideration is whether there is adequate access to the transportation network, utilities, drainage systems, and open space. The proposed amendments would be supported by these existing services, and no changes to any of them are requested. The most significant aspect of this amendment is the question of whether an outdoor dog play area will cause harmful impacts to its adjacent and future neighbors. The existing plan development document, which currently does not allow permanent outdoor uses, also includes a statement about the importance of the commercial center being sensitive to the adjacent neighborhood. To assist in answering the question about possible harmful impacts, the applicants commissioned a noise study from Wave Engineering. The results of the noise study show that the expected noise produced by the outdoor dog play area will not exceed the decibel limits established by the city code and may be further mitigated by the fence that the applicant plans on installing around the perimeter of the play area. The applicant also submitted a waste management plan explaining how dog and other solid waste generated during operations will be disposed of. The question of odor was not addressed with this application. Should the applicant decide to request a conditional use permit and go through the site development plan process, the details of how an animal boarding and care facility will operate will be closely evaluated, and issues of odor, vibration, and glare will be explored in depth at that time. Lastly, the extent to which development is consistent with the applicable adopted comprehensive plan must be considered. The proposed amendment supports the applicable 2014 Comprehensive Plan vision and policies and the South Neighborhood Plan, both of which were in effect at the time the land development application was submitted. The applicant has addressed all of the relevant criteria established for amendments to general plan development plans. The criteria regarding residential development is not applicable to this requested amendment. Based on the analysis of the proposed amendments to the plan development standards that govern the subject site, staff recommends that the members of the Planning Commission vote to recommend approval of the amendments at Pad A of Parcel 1B at 501E East County Line Road.
Does that conclude your presentation?
These include the possible options available to the Planning Commission this evening. Oh, wait, I see.
Is there any way you can run that prior slide up that was not showing, nobody could see it? The one prior to that? Yeah, that, when it ran up the first time, it was way off center.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Before we get into questions of staff, just want to let the audience know that the Planning Commission is advisory on matters of zoning changes. City Council has the final authority for zoning changes. So we advise, they have the final vote. So whatever happens tonight, Council will be taking this up at whatever designated time they have for this item. Technical questions. Sherry, start with you.
I don't have any to start with. I may in a moment.
Elizabeth, thank you for the presentation. It's a PDC, is an overlay district that was established, or was a zoning district that was established years ago. Do you know the underlying zoning prior to that? Was it a B2 or is it separate from B2?
You know, let me pull up the original SDPPD. It may reference that on its,
Okay.
may reference the history of the site. Just a moment. Oh, my mice.
How much time are you going to need to find that out?
A couple minutes.
We can move on to another question.
I can pull this up.
Perhaps we can go through our questions while Mike is doing nothing, he can get to work. What other questions do you have?
My next question is, as I understand it, the rezoning would still, actually, the business would still require a conditional use public hearing if this was approved. Would that conditional use hearing then consider the exact site plan that's proposed? There's a site plan included with the application. I'm wondering how modifiable or changeable that site plan might be at
Sure.
that time.
So, right. So, yes, the hearing this evening is to discuss the three topics that would alter the development standards of the PD, which does not alter the fact that an animal boarding and care facility is considered a conditional use by the city of Littleton in a B2 zone district. And because the PD identifies all of the allowed uses as being those allowed in B2, that's what triggers that conditional use permit. So yes, that is another item that would again come before you should the applicant decide to pursue that. So this evening, the reason why the site plan looks only from the plan view down is because at this point, architecture is not something that gets reviewed or discussed at a plan development level. So yes, should they proceed to a conditional use permit with a sketch plan or a site development plan, you will be looking at elevations of the building of all four sides. There will be much greater detail about all of the details about the operation of the business, how access to and through the site is going to be coordinated, where doggy drop-off and pickup would happen, where the play areas are, where the trash would be disposed of, all of those fine-grained details that are appropriate for review at the site plan process level, yes.
Okay, thank you. So as I see it, the site plan that was included with the application is just an example of what it could be.
Because for the purpose of tonight's meeting, what they want to indicate is that expansion of the possible footprint. So that is a thing that you can express from above looking down, and it makes sense to record through the PD. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
David? Or you done? I'm sorry.
No, I think that I'll save the rest of the questions for the applicant.
Okay, so with the change in allowable uses, is it just the one use that will be allowed conditional on a conditional use permit?
Yes, so we wanted to be as specific and narrow as possible with this request. The way that the language is written on the proposed document is that the only possible permanent outdoor use that could be allowed at Pad A within Parcel 1B would be a outdoor doggy play area should, in the future, the Planning Commission approve a conditional use permit for an animal boarding and care facility. So that's the only way that this one particular use, an outdoor doggy play area, could be allowed. It does not allow any other permanent outdoor uses.
Okay, so no petting zoos, no bird sanctuaries, whatever?
Right, no lawnmower repair shop, right,
Okay, with outdoor use.
correct.
Okay, and then my other question was on decibel limits. It talks about, at least in the summary that you gave, about, being below city limits. What are the limits and where are we?
Sure. If you will allow it, I will defer my answer and let Mr. Seep with Wave Engineering, he's the author of that study.
Okay, let's hold off on that then.
Okay.
We'll stick with questions for staff, and then when
Thank
we
you.
get the applicant up, I'll move on to that. I was more interested in what the limits were for the city, not necessarily.
I don't think she caught that. You might have to ask her again.
Yeah, I'll hold on.
I'm sorry.
I was more interested in what the limits are for the city. What are those limits that?
So, I'm looking for Mr. Seep to correct me, because it is about sound engineering levels that someone in his capacity is probably better at describing, explaining to you than I am.
I just want to know decibel levels that the city allows.
Okay, so let me, for the case of
Well, he can explain it later.
that daytime
You can
use.
just tell me. Yeah, daytime use, I guess. Oh, that was my other question.
So there's two different levels. There's a maximum allowed limit for daytime noise generation and a maximum evening limit for noise generation.
I'll just jump in. So
We're-
you would measure it,
Excuse me, no, this isn't. He either has to come down, we're asking technical questions of staff.
He's staff.
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I thought it was one of the applicants talking, sorry.
no, I'm sorry, I got a cold. You probably don't understand. Can't hear my voice.
You all look alike, yeah, thank you.
So this comes out of the city's noise ordinance. That's where the limits are established, and it's 7-3-6. So from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., if you were measuring, say, from an adjacent residential area, the maximum dBA would be 55 from a residential area and 50 at night. So that's kind of the established range if you're measuring from those adjacent residential areas that would be to the northeast of this parcel.
Okay, that's lower than I thought it would be. Although I think it's similar to that other indoor dog facility we visited a while back. All right, then my other question is, when is the appropriate time to limit the number of hours that the outdoor play area could be used? Is that at the conditional use stage, or is that at this stage?
I would say this would be that's a development standard limitation that could appropriately be applied at this level.
Okay, and are there proposed hours at this point, or
No.
not yet? Okay,
The applicant has established, through their operation summary, they've made statements about their working hours and their own limitations that they set for when dogs are allowed to be outdoors.
right, okay. All right, thanks.
Jason?
Certainly, thank you. I think I'd like some explanation on the difference between the L90 and the L10 as discussed in the noise study, but that might be more getting into details that the applicant's sound engineer could answer.
I would prefer to defer.
Bruce?
Okay, on page 7 of the, I believe it's the staff report, the first sentence says, "All issues and concerns raised by referral agencies have been addressed by the applicant." Didn't see a list of issues and concerns. Is there such a list, or what were the issues that were raised?
Tri-County Health Department recommended that they submit a waste management plan, which they did. South Metro Fire wanted to make sure, we're making comments regarding the structure that will certainly be addressable at a site development plan level. Things about how the building will be sprinkled, about the fire safety of the structure itself, which is not at question at this level. Otherwise, there were no other concerns raised.
Okay, all right. Code section 10-4-15 talks about animal boarding and care facilities, and there's a variety of points in here that have to be met. I'm sure you're familiar with them based on this, but I wanted to get a sense from you that as part of staff's recommendation, you're satisfied that, for example, dogs boarded overnight will be housed in individual indoor secured kennels because staff isn't present. Subsection D, which I think is pretty pertinent here, says the facility must control odor, dust, noise, waste, drainage, and security so as not to constitute a nuisance, safety hazard, or health problem to adjoining property or uses. And talk a little bit about your guys' understanding of how they're going to satisfy those attributes and others.
I guess I would jump in and say that all those criteria will be part of the CUP process if indeed they came forward looking to operate that animal boarding and care facility. So all those criteria that come through in regard to the hours of operation and those types of things would all be the criteria that Planning Commission would go to at the next step.
Which I respect, but by the same token, staff in recommending the amendment theoretically has to make a judgment with respect to some of these criteria. There's not much point in recommending it.
So Commissioner Stallman, Mike Sutherland, I'm the Deputy Director. When we looked at this particular case, the PD amendment for these 3 specific items, it's sort of a graduated process for the applicant. This is the first issue to address for them is the PD itself. Mm-hmm. We did look at, well, if they're going to allow an outdoor use, in particular a dog play area, it seemed to us that one of the critical items for that discussion at this time, the PD, was sound, mm-hmm. and also to some degree waste control. So we focused really on those and asked the applicant, even though that's part of the applicant's, that could be part of their conditional use permit, it seemed to be particularly relevant to this discussion. So we asked the applicant to focus on those, and in reviewing those, staff looked at the sound report and was satisfied that they could meet city code standards as Mr. Betzing outlined in our code. And from that, it appears that this particular stage, they've got in our recommendation, we thought they had a reasonable chance of addressing the conditional use permit pieces at that point. But we really focused on those two areas, waste control and noise.
All right, thank you, that's helpful, I appreciate that.
To be clear, we did, to reiterate what Mike said, the language that we relied on is found in the SDP PD itself. There's a phrase about the desire for the original development back in 1983, 84 to be a good neighbor to its adjacent users and neighbors resonated with us, as did a portion of the approval criteria, the application and intent language in the code about amendments to general plan development plans. There's a phrase that says essentially the same thing, that the proposed uses need to prove themselves to be sensitive and good neighbors. So we relied on those two statements as the basis for our request for a noise study and more detail on the waste management plan.
Sure, okay, all right, thank you, appreciate that.
Go ahead.
This was brought forward before the new comp plan, correct?
Correct.
So I've got two questions and a comment. Under our South Neighborhood Plan, Goal 4 states to protect residential and recreational areas from negative visual and audible intrusions of commercial and industrial development. And under Land Use Policy 1, the residential areas be protected from commercial and industrial development by utilizing a combination of setbacks, buffers, screening, and other measures to reduce visual and audible impacts created by the development. Both these reference audible. Is the city just going to rely upon the applicant's findings of noise, or what does the city do to make sure that these audible concerns and impacts are studied from the city point of view?
I think what we relied on was, number one, the city's zoning ordinance about what does the city establish as limitations for daytime and evening noise limits. And no, the city does not typically hire a sound engineer or commission a study on its own. It does, in fact, rely on the applicant to produce those studies and make an argument on their own behalf. And they are hopefully referencing the city's zoning requirements and decibel levels in their study and explaining how they reached the conclusions of their study.
Were those decibels considering the potential of 150 dogs close to a neighborhood?
Yes.
How so?
Again, I will defer to the engineers who conducted the study who can explain that in greater detail.
Okay, next question. So we're talking about a week's worth of potentially 150 dogs' waste being stored in an outdoor container. Will there be any health hazard issues to be studied for that?
No. Again, it is the applicant's requirement to comply with the State of Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment regarding solid waste. And we would require that they meet the needs and satisfy the requests of Tri-County Health Department. When it comes time to their conditional use permit, again, should they decide to pursue that, the details of that waste management plan will be written out in detail on that conditional use permit site development plan or sketch plan document. So it'll be documented there for should there be complaints. That would be the document that code enforcement and other city staff would rely on to hold the applicant or the business owner accountable.
And just one comment, when going through the emails that were received, it was confusing because some of them were just repeated over and over and over, and it made it really hard to amalgamate what everyone was saying. So just as an FYI, that happened.
Thank you.
Same problem, yeah. Could you explain, I think I understand, could you explain to our audience why this is a two-step process? Why do we separate the zoning issue from the conditional use issue?
The way that the city's regulations are written, development standards is planner jargon for the rules about how you get to develop your land, which is what zoning does. And so plan development guides establish that specific zoning, also known as development standards, that govern that particular site. And because it applies just to that particular site, we get this quasi-judicial process. And so development standards, zoning standards are established at that level. Plan development guide, it governs the entire area, or in this case, it's going to govern a very discrete area of land. We're calling it Pad A of Parcel 1B, and these rules are only going to apply to that one area. Our zoning regulations don't go into detail about the exact operations of businesses or proposed uses in those places. It does not go into detail regarding architecture. It does not go into great detail regarding new access points, new drainage systems, new open spaces, should a developer want to change those or a landowner want to alter those with their property. All of those issues, based on the way the city's zoning regulations are written, get addressed at other levels. In the case of animal boarding and care facilities, they get addressed at the conditional use permit. There are a dozen or so uses in the city of Littleton that require a heightened level of scrutiny. The city has said out loud, we think these have the potential to either create nuisance or be subject to nuisance or be a kind of use that requires a deeper dive into the subject for health, safety, and welfare purposes. And an animal boarding and care facility falls into that category. So it gets addressed at the next step past this planned development phase, which we are in today. Does that help?
Okay.
And may I add to that, Chairman Rudnicki, it is possible that if the applicant didn't want to change any part of the building or any part of the site, that they could just apply for a conditional use permit for a doggy daycare if it was going to be all contained inside the building. As it was, the applicant really wanted to have that outdoor play area, which was prohibited by the zoning of the parcel. And so that's why the two-step process. They could have potentially done a one-step process, but they saw this as necessary for their operations.
Well, there's the three triggers. There's the square footage increase, the height change for the tower, and of course the outdoor dog runs.
That's correct.
So, okay, those are the three issues require the zoning change.
Correct.
Okay. I'll ask the applicant about Three Margaritas and what's the status there? Are they being forced out, or do they always intend to move? I guess I can wait for the applicant on that. I do, well, before I ask my final question, there was a question previous about the prior zoning. Did you find out?
Yes. So looking at the originally approved SDP PD for Highland Square Oakbrook Commercial Center, Parcel 1B at the time of this document had been zoned BP, or Business Park. And with this 1984 version, that was proposed to go to PDC, to go to commercial, planned development commercial, which allowed all the uses allowed in the B2 zone district.
So it started as a business park and went to commercial. Okay. A comment here. I asked staff to provide an idea of what the permitted uses are on Parcel 1B. You sent us a rather large drawing, which I blew up several times so I could read it. I'm going to read it out loud here. Parcel 1B shall be all those uses permitted under the B2 district, except arcades, automotive repairs, or gas pump use, separate fast food restaurants, or any permanent outdoor uses. So those are the permitted, everything in B2, which you can go through our zoning code and see the long list of permitted uses. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, it's time for, whoop. Oh, I'm sorry.
I do
Go
have a
ahead.
question now. I do have a question about, did you, as staff looked at, are there any standards around the number of pets that can be cared for or that are recommended? I saw a reference to the Department of Agriculture for some limitations on the number of animals that can be or should be housed within a kennel or even a care center. So I wondered if you have those kinds of numbers.
The city has not established numbers like that. And again, those are state rules that are in place. And so we would defer to the state's authority in those regards. Should they proceed to a conditional use permit, we do require that the applicant provide a copy of all state licenses, making sure that they are fully licensed and up to date with those agencies. So we rely on those agencies to be, managing those regulations that they've established.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Slow down here. Seeing none, now we'll go to applicant presentation. If you'd like to make a presentation, please come forward. If you could state your name, your address, and if you're a consultant, you'll end up telling us what your specialty is.
Okay.
And if you could speak right into the
All
microphone.
right, very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me here this evening. My name is Carrie Shohet. I am the co-owner of Hobnob Pet Daycare and Hotel, and I co-own it with Steve Morris, who is also speaking with me this evening. We're working on a little slideshow here of pictures of our facilities, so you have an idea of we actually currently have 2 locations, so you can get an idea of what those look like. We currently have 1 location in the city of Lakewood and 1 in Greenwood Village. I must say I'm very excited to bring my services next to the city of Littleton. I was actually born and raised in the city of Littleton. I actually attended Powell Middle School, which is just around the corner from this location in the Oak Brook community. I also, growing up, remember shopping at the Safeway. That was the anchor to the shopping center. I actually got my driver's license when I turned 16 at the DMV motor vehicle, which is right next door to this building. And I also played competitive soccer for Littleton United Soccer Club until I was 18. So I'm very familiar with the city of Littleton. I know the community well, and I would love to bring Hobnob to this location in Littleton. I think it would be a great fit for the community, especially next to the emergency hospital, that animal hospital that is going in, and it would provide a great benefit to the community. So it looks like we have our pictures going here. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background on Hobnob. We've been in business at our Lakewood location for 11 years. That facility is approximately 7,600 square feet. And we also have 3,200 square feet of dedicated outdoor play area. We actually rezoned this parcel back in 2008 because it is also located in a retail location. We are surrounded by a variety of neighbors. Just to the west of us, there's a Natural Grocers by Vitamin Cottage. And to be exact, they're about 90 feet away from us. They've been a great neighbor to have. In fact, their store manager brings their dog to our facility 3 days a week for daycare. Just to the south of us, there's an apartment complex. And in fact, they're 70 feet away from our back play yard fence. This 3-story apartment complex, the neighbors on the north side of that building, they can actually see our outdoor play areas. And many times in the summer, We can see them watching the dogs in the play areas. Just to the east of us, there's a fitness studio, and they're actually only about 8 feet away from us. Their building literally rubs up against the side of our building. And then about 150 feet away from us, southwest, is a Safeway grocery store. So we're surrounded in this location by a variety of businesses and residents. And our Greenwood Village location, we've been there in operation for almost 6 years. That facility is about 7,300 square feet with almost 8,000 square feet of dedicated outdoor play area there. We are also surrounded by other businesses, most of those being restaurants. Actually, the front of our building, we actually share a building with Dunkin' Donuts. They lease the front part of our building, which faces Arapahoe Road. And actually, this is quite interesting. They have a drive-through. I don't know if anyone has visited that facility, but their drive-through speaker and order sign sits about 4 feet away from our outdoor play area. So our fence is literally 4 feet from their ordering sign. And there's an interesting story that goes along with that. When they were looking to lease the space from us, they originally thought they would put a sound wall in there because they were worried about noise. And I don't know if, I'm sure we've all been through a drive-through and you know that it can be difficult to hear people sometimes when you're ordering. And if you have a lot of background noise, that can make it very difficult to either place your order or for the employee to hear the order being placed. So originally the plan was for them to put a sound wall there to help prevent any noise from the play areas. And they decided when they were doing the construction, and they were doing their build out, and they were at our facility in the area that, well, actually, there wasn't very much noise. So they decided, well, we're gonna go ahead and put in the drive-through, put in the ordering sign, and open the business. And if there's a problem later on, they'll add the wall. Well, they've been in operation for 5 years now, and there is no sound wall there. We've not had problems with them being able to use the drive-through. So I think that says a lot about noise, or lack of noise. Okay. So I just want to give you some basic information about how we operate and some of the services we provide. So Hobnob, I think, is a high-end facility. We offer dog daycare, hotel, swimming, grooming, full-service grooming, self-service dog washing, and specialty dog food and supplies. Our facilities average anywhere from 75 to 115 dogs at each facility per day. These dogs are separated into groups based on size and temperament. We currently have at each location 3 indoor and corresponding outdoor yards. And these dogs that come to our facilities that use us for daycare or hotel must complete what we call a trial day. This is a free visit for the dog, so we can evaluate their personality, see how they do with other dogs, and make sure they're a good fit for our business. Not every dog passes a trial day, and sometimes we have to ban dogs from returning, which is never fun to do. So what that means is that every dog that comes to our facility must be capable of commingling with other dogs. We do not do isolation boarding. So we don't have any indoor-outdoor runs where dogs are solo. We don't isolate dogs in our facility. All of our dogs, and you can see in the pictures, are commingled in groups with staff. So speaking of our staff, all of our staff is trained when we hire them on basic canine behavior. And they're given an employee manual, which I brought with me today. And I also have some training sheets and some basic canine body posture or dog language handouts, and I figured it may be helpful if I could hand these out to them. Okay, I think I'll get one of these. I think there's enough. Great. So you can use this kind of as a guide to follow along with me. So the one highlighted in pink is our canine body postures, and it talks briefly about dog behavior, and it demonstrates to our staff. We also have a video, and we have corresponding posters, which it references in the handout. And it teaches staff on what to look for and how to supervise dogs in groups. The sheet that's highlighted in green is our Hobnob training checkoff sheet. This, again, for all new staff members, they have to complete this, and they get assigned to a lead staff person who puts them through training, followed by a manager test on page 2. And then page 3 kind of goes through our normal daily routine. I figured this may be helpful for you guys. But one of the things I want to speak specifically about, on page 1, if you go halfway down, it talks about dog care. And the third item is called Bummer. It says Bummer technique. And this is something specifically that we teach all new staff on how to supervise dogs and how to discipline dogs if they get out of hand. So Bummer, it's kind of like timeout that you would use for a small child. Our staff person, if we see a dog that's misbehaving or exhibiting inappropriate behavior, our staff person would leash them up, make them sit, and remove their freedom. And we kind of have what's called a 3-strike policy, which you see there. So if after 3 tries, after they've done the Bummer technique, the dog sits, he's on leash for about 30 seconds, he's released to go play again. If he continues this behavior, we do timeout. So we take him inside, remove him from playgroup, and give him a timeout. Again, kind of like what you would do with a small child. So this is how we discipline dogs who are unruly or out of control. And this is a very important part of our job. So I'd like to speak a little bit about what we do with them, specifically when they're out in group. Our dogs are engaged in activities during the day. All of our dogs that come to our facility are in daycare. And you can see we have a wide variety of different shots of the dogs in our play areas. These dogs are engaged with staff. They're kept busy. They're engaged in activities. We do things like group sits, gate waits. We call them gate waits, so they all have to sit before going through the gate. But they're engaged and entertained and not left to their own devices. This is very different from a dog who is either left home alone, either in the house or in the backyard, or dogs at an animal shelter. These dogs are bored, they can be anxious, they can be destructive, they can be very loud. Anybody who's ever had a neighbor who's left their dog outside all day to bark, who's left alone, we all know what that sounds like. This is very different because our dogs are kept busy, they're engaged, they're with other dogs, so they're not just standing there barking. We also have hotel rooms, which I mentioned. Our hotel rooms are about 4 by 6, 4 feet by 6 feet wide. And we also have bigger rooms, which you call family rooms, if we have people that have multiple dogs. Our current facility has about 67 rooms each. Our new location, we're proposing about 74 rooms, hotel rooms is what we call them. And our new building is proposed to be about 7,200 square feet, like was mentioned. We also have an indoor pool. Each facility has an indoor pool. It's about 10,000 gallons, so it's an indoor swimming pool. They're both heated to about 80 degrees. And we use these for a variety of purposes. We have a lot of customers who have dogs that like to swim, so dogs that are there for daycare or hotel, people can elect for their dogs to use our pool. And usually midday, we take them in groups into the pool area. We have a shallow end and we have a deep end, and we throw toys, and they run and play and have a good time. We also have customers who use our pool for therapeutic purposes. If they have a dog, say, that just had knee surgery, or who's elderly and maybe is losing some mobility in the hind end, they will come to us to help strengthen their dog. We actually have a police dog that sees us regularly in Lakewood who was injured on the job. And so we work with these dogs, we get them in the pool, put them in a life jacket, and we work to strengthen and increase their mobility. And we also have customers who have dogs that just like to swim. And they can use our pool, they can come in and use the pool for their own dog and just throw the toy and allow their dog to swim. And this has become quite popular because people are discovering that many of our reservoirs and streams are polluted with things like Giardia. So they like to come and use our facility because their dogs don't get sick. And our pool is treated with chlorine and actually ozone. So it's treated and maintained like you would a human pool. And just some information on our daily schedule. If you turn to the third page on the green highlighted sheet, it kind of goes through our normal daily routine. And again, we give this to all new staff so they have a guide as to what the normal day looks like. So our staff arrives at 6 a.m. every day. Our managers arrive at 6 a.m. And they get things turned on and geared up for the day, and they start meal prep for any dogs that have stayed with us in hotel. Our back staff arrives at 6:30. At 6:30 is actually the time that we open our doors. We get dogs out from hotel that have stayed with us overnight at that time for a brief restroom break in the morning before they go up for breakfast at 7. All of our hotel dogs are up from 7 to 8 a.m. For breakfast. And at this point, we're also receiving dogs arriving for daycare. And dogs, again, are out until noon. We do have a 2-hour nap time from noon to 2 every day. Any dog staying with us in hotel gets a 2-hour nap. Other dogs that are there for daycare, some of them will also get a break if people bring lunch for their dog or they require extra rest for their dog. We will choose to put them up at that time as well. However, we do run play groups throughout the day. So during that noon to 2 time, we also have play groups going. And then at 2 o'clock, our staff comes back, the staff that went for lunch. They come back, we let the rest of those dogs back out again, so our hotel dogs and dogs that were up for nap time from daycare, they go out at 2. They're out until about 3:30, at which time our hotel guests go back up for dinner. And any dog that comes in for daycare whose owners, again, require more rest or require dinner, they go up at that time as well. At this time of the day is when people start to pick up their dogs from daycare. So anywhere from, I'd say, 3 until 7, dogs leave our facility. Dogs are up for dinner until about 5:30, at which point our staff brings them out again. Again, we're talking about hotel dogs only. Daycare dogs are out during this whole time. And they go back up for the evening at right about 7 o'clock. That's the time which we close. All of our daycare dogs have left for the day. And we do a walkthrough of the facility, making sure all the dogs are in their room, they all have a water bowl, they all have a bed, and they have everything they need for the night. Each dog has their own secure room. And once we've checked and done the walkthrough, it's lights out, and then our staff leaves for the evening, usually somewhere between 7:15 and 7:30. Sometimes we're there later working on administrative things. However, we have a very strict policy about not going back and bothering the dogs. Once we turn out the lights, we find that they're much happier if we don't go back and bother them and walk the hallways. So that is why we don't have anyone that stays overnight. I like to tell my customers that ask the question, well, gosh, does somebody stay overnight and watch them? Well, no, we don't. Each dog has their own secure room. And just like you wouldn't stand and watch your dog sleep all night long at home, we don't need to do that at our facility either. If there is an emergency, our facilities are currently monitored by security and fire. We work with West Metro Fire District in Lakewood and South Metro in Greenwood Village. And we do have an evacuation plan in place, and they know how to open our rooms and get dogs out if needed. Okay. So I want to talk briefly about our waste management protocols. I know a lot of people have concerns about odors coming from our facility. So all waste is immediately picked up throughout the day and placed in our trash can. Each yard has a trash can with a liner. So throughout the day, that is put immediately into that trash can. Our trash cans then are double bagged and put into the dumpster at least twice a day. So at least once in the midday and then again at the end of the day before we leave. Sometimes we do it more frequently, but again, this depends on number of dogs and weather conditions, and our staff gets to make those decisions. But at least twice a day. We also actually use, so after we pick up waste, we use a hose. Each yard has a hose. We frequently use the hose to clean off maybe any residual debris, including dog hair. And then we also have a product called Liquid Live Bacteria. I have a spec sheet on it here. I'm happy to let you guys take a look and pass it around if it's something you'd like to see. But the purpose of this product is it promotes decomposition of any remaining organic matter. So we use this in our yard every day, just in the outdoor yards. We have turf, artificial turf outside. When we spray this on our turf and our playscapes, our play structures to keep everything clean and smelling nice. And it's safe to use around animals. In fact, it's recommended for things like marinas and septic tanks and things like that. So it's a great product to use to keep our facility clean and smelling great, specifically outdoors. Our dumpster, in which we put all the waste into, is emptied once a week. We also have a central vacuum system. It's a wet-dry vacuum system designed specifically for the pet care industry and pet hospitals. And this is a great tool that we use to clean and sanitize the inside of our facility throughout the day. And it allows us to sanitize all of our rooms, all of our walls. We literally clean the facility from top to bottom using this system every single day, including our lobby area. And I think this is what separates us a lot from our competition. This is a very expensive system. Most facilities don't have things like this. And we frequently get customers that come in and say, gosh, I notice when I bring my dog here, it doesn't smell. Usually when you walk into a dog daycare, it smells doggy, or you can smell dog poop. And our facility does not have an odor, and that is because of our cleaning standards that we have in place. So in summary, I hope that you have a good understanding of Hobnob and its operations as a business. I really appreciate the time that you've given me today to speak about my locations. And we'd love the opportunity to be a part of the Littleton community. I'll give Steve a moment to speak as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. My name is Steve Morris. I'm the one that bought the building back about 9 months ago. And thank you, Elizabeth and Mike and council members, and thank you all for, this is a big turnout, and I'm sure you're all concerned about things that are going in your neighborhood or around your neighborhood. If I lived in your neighborhood, I would be the same way. I'd be here. But hopefully, when you understand our business a little better, you won't think that if you live near a Hobnob, it'll be the end of the world or some terrible thing. I think it's a very well-run business, and there's a lot to it, as Carrie said. The restaurant was for sale because the person that owned the restaurant business and the property said that he owns 10 others, and he said this one was just not performing well. He wasn't making money, and so he wanted to go ahead and sell the property, and part of the deal was a lease back for about 8 months. That's expired, so now Trace Margaritas is on a month-to-month lease, and I'm hoping they stay there until we can get open. But my daughter Carrie and I had been looking for a third location for our Hobnob hotel business, and this location really appealed to us. One thing that stands out, and if you visited the location, you'll see this, that the back area where the dogs are out playing, would be out playing, is down pretty far. It's down in a hole almost. It sits just with Phillips just to the east and County Line just to the south of the property. And once we put up a wooden fence on the sides there, I think that will do a lot to take care of any occasional noise problems. I hope that everybody has had a chance to visit one of our existing locations, so that and taken a tour so that you could see what one really looks like. And in my opinion, Hobnob is not just any pet hotel. In fact, I would describe Hobnob as a first-class hotel and daycare facility for dogs. We strive to be like a Westin or a Hyatt for dogs, not a Motel 6. So I don't think it's fair to compare Hobnob to some of the other dog places that have popped up here and there. So that means that our customers would not consider a dirty, loud, or smelly place to be acceptable for their dog. And we're not the cheapest place to take your dog to, but we want to be the best place. When customers drop off their dog at Hobnob, they trust us to provide security, a clean and healthy environment, and a fun environment full of playful exercise. As Carrie said, we do not do isolation boarding, and dogs must be sociable, so we do it. Has for years been sort of a sleepy little retail center rather than a real vibrant, thriving one. It needs more businesses that attract good, affluent customers. If the Oak Brook Center is more prosperous, the Oak Brook neighborhood will have better property values, not worse. Carrie and I plan to invest a significant amount of money into this property to, one, improve the asphalt parking lot that's full of potholes and needs restriping. Two, trim and improve the landscaping that right now seems to have been neglected. And three, improve and expand the building, including putting a whole new retail front on the building, and bring it up to date and give it a more of a fresh look. In summary, we want to be an asset, not an eyesore. We intend to invest in and improve the property, create a much-needed and prosperous business in the Oak Brook Center, and be a good neighbor to the surrounding homes and businesses. Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Good. We'll start with questions. Jason?
Certainly. Could have the person who did the noise study explain how that worked and how the L10 levels versus L90 levels are functioning for purposes of the study? And would just like, kind of a general overview of methodology and results.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Ben Seep. I'm with Wave Engineering and was involved in the testing and the preparation of the report and the noise study. And our goal was to look at whether it complied with the Littleton noise ordinance. So everything we did referred back to the methodology in the ordinance, including the L10 levels, the L90 levels, all of those things are in the ordinance, and that's the reason that we used those metrics. There's a lot of different ways to measure noise, and especially with a noise that fluctuates in level like dogs barking, it gets more complicated to assign a number to that. And so that's the reasoning behind the approach that we took. Just reading from the noise code here, the L10 level, 10th percentile, is the A-weighted sound pressure level that has exceeded 10% of the time, or the level that has exceeded 6 minutes and 1 hour, is denoted L10. And similarly, the 90th percentile is the A-weighted sound pressure level that has exceeded 90% of the time, or the level that has exceeded for 54 minutes and 1 hour, and is denoted L90. So essentially that means the L10, the sound level, if you measure for an hour, only goes above that for 6 minutes out of that hour. So that's near the upper limit of how loud something is, whatever the source is during that hour. The L90 is exceeded almost every minute, 54 minutes out of the hour, so that's sort of the lower ambient background noise level. So we often use those numbers for other codes. So L10 is usually how loud is the thing that you're trying to measure. L90 is the background level when that noise source isn't happening. So in this case, on this site, it's right near County Line Road and C470. So the ambient level is pretty steady traffic noise from those two areas. It doesn't change a lot. That's the L90 level in the background. And then the L10 would be the levels from the dogs barking. How loud does it get above that background level? And then the code talks about the limits for daytime and nighttime for residential properties. The limit there for normal continuous steady noise levels would be 55 during the day and 50 dB at night. And that's an L90 level based on the way the code is written. We chose to apply this limit, or believe that this is the appropriate method based on the way the code is written. There's a section on duration correction that describes fluctuating or intermittent noise, since the dogs don't, the dog barking is intermittent and not continuous for the full hour, just the same level like it is for a steady traffic noise sound. This approach that's laid out in the code says that the level should be modified and adjusted for this duration difference. Says that we should take into account the L10 level, so the level from the dogs barking, and it has to be, let me read the best way to summarize it. So it can be no more than 15 dBA greater than the ambient noise, the L90, measured when the source is quiet, and shall be, in no case shall the 10th percentile levels exceed 15 dB greater than the levels in this section. And then the L10 can't be more than 15 above that daytime level of 55. So normally you would be allowed to have an L10 up to 70, but then it's also corrected for if your background level is quieter, you can be no more than 15 dB above that ambient level. So in this case, we didn't do a long-term ambient noise level study. We measured while we were on site, which was around 9 a.m. So around rush hour levels, it was about 53 dBA. So we applied the 15 dB correction to that number, which came up with a limit of 68 dBA for the L10 for the dogs barking. So the dogs barking couldn't be louder than 68 at the neighboring property, following the methodology laid out in the Littleton Code. So on page 7 of my report, there's a summary showing an overall aerial view with the predicted L10 levels. So thinking about L10 again, when an individual dog barks, it will be louder than this level. But the duration is very short for an individual bark. So that's why the L10 is lower than that actual level of each discrete dog bark. So this isn't, the L10 doesn't represent a maximum level. It's not the level of an individual dog bark. It's 6 minutes out of an hour. The level's going to be higher than this. And that's spread out over the full hour, not 6 minutes of continuous barking and then it's silent after that. It takes into account the intermittent and fluctuating levels. Any other questions related to the L10 and L90? It's sort of a complicated way that we've taken, that people have developed to evaluate intermittent noise. Trying to explain it the best I can, but I know it's something that we deal with all the time, but isn't familiar to most people.
Let's do something a little different here. Since we have the consultant at the podium, maybe go through all our sound questions, and then we'll get back to you for other questions. That'd be okay?
Yeah.
Okay with everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Bruce, you have any noise questions?
Well, I guess for comparison purposes, were there measurements, for example, of Lakewood and Greenwood Village that were done vis-a-vis the Littleton Code to see whether they were in compliance, just for a baseline?
We did take measurements to inform the analysis here at the Greenwood Village location. I didn't go back and look at, we use that as our source level and then applied that to this site and the particularities of this site with the retaining wall and the distance to the neighbors. But I didn't look at the businesses around that site and what the levels were at those property lines, since each site has different neighbors. Some have retail, some are residential. I didn't look at it that way.
Broadly speaking, what was the conclusion? The Greenwood Village site looks like it would have met our code, hypothetically.
I don't know the zoning of the adjacent properties, and I only measured there at the edge of their play area to identify the source level. Right. I didn't measure at the edge of their property, so I'd have to do some more analysis. I can't really speculate.
Okay. Well, and I'm not asking for a technical response. I guess just in layman's terms, any color you can add would be useful.
Sure. So one of the things we did, discuss in the report as well, is we did some subjective testing, where we took a recording of dogs barking that we measured at one of the facilities. We played that back at the same levels that we measured in order to simulate what's it going to sound like with the dogs in the yard, and tried to get it as accurate as we could, measuring at the source location, and then just listening, how is it going to sound over at the houses nearby. And we found that dogs were audible, but they were relatively faint and below the level of a passing car, but audible above the steady hum of the cars on County Line and C-470.
Okay.
And another way that I looked at it that's not in the report was evaluating the barrier effect from that retaining wall, which is significant. If you're at the nearest homes, you cannot see the outdoor play yard because it's depressed. The barrier effect is equivalent to nearly tripling the distance if you're on flat ground, just the distance loss. So it's similar to being approximately 700 feet away from the play area if you were on flat ground with no barrier in between. So, and I also mapped it out on Google Maps, like how many houses down is that in this neighborhood with the house spacing, and it was equivalent to about 9 houses away. So it's a pretty long distance effectively created as a combination of the retaining wall effect and then the distance to the neighbor. It's similar to having this dog yard not right next door, not right across the street, but it's similar to having it about 9 houses down in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So when you did your study, it was for 100 dogs, because that's approximately what they had at Greenwood Village.
Right.
And then you did a mathematical equation to get up to 150 dogs and added additional 3 dBA.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain how you got to the 3 dBA? I mean, I know it's logarithmic, but it almost seemed a little low for going up a third of amount of dogs.
Sure, and that's all going back to decibel addition. So for example, if you have a concert and you have 2 speakers on stage putting out a certain sound level, and you put 2 more speakers at that same level, the level goes up by 3 dB. And then if you double it again from 4 to 8, that's another 3 dB. So every time you're doubling the number of sources, you're increasing it by 3. So in this case, we had a 50% increase in the number of dogs that they could have at this facility versus the one that we measured. I chose to go ahead and just add 3 dB, 100% increase, to take into account maybe more dogs, they'll bark more often because they'll get more riled up potentially, and just as an extra safety factor.
So it's the same as an antenna attenuation then, going up by the 3 dBA. Okay, I get that. So when you were looking at the L10 to create the barking noise, you know, the 6 minutes, and you're looking for the lulls, because then you're comparing it to the L90 to be able to add it to it. But, you know, in reality, in the neighborhood, they're going to get that barking with the L10. It's always going to be a cumulative, so it almost seems that it's trying to take away that cumulative effect.
As far as the accumulation of the
The
traffic
dog
noise
noise
and the
along
dog.
with the driving noise, yes. I just like to hear your thoughts. Perhaps I'm not looking at that correctly.
Yep. Our calculations are based on just the level of the dogs predicted at that level. We didn't do a long-term study of the background noise level. So they certainly would add together, and many codes will allow you to compare the 2 levels. So say the traffic noise is 50 and the dog's barking is 52. Well, the traffic noise is contributing to that 52 because they're so close to each other. So you're allowed to logarithmically subtract the background level and say that without the traffic noise there, the dogs would have been some level lower than the 52. So we haven't tried to do any of those sorts of adjustments here. It's just looking at, in isolation, the levels from the dogs and then comparing that to the noise ordinance.
Okay. I have another noise question, but I think it'll be better answered by the applicant. So I'm going to think I'll wait for the applicant to come back up.
Oh, okay. David, you have any questions?
Maybe I missed this, but what were when you measured the sound, did you measure at different distances? And what were those distances?
Yes, so the figure on page 7 of the report shows the predicted L10 level at a lot of different locations that we measured at. And the way that we arrived at these numbers, to explain a little more, we used what's called pink noise on site, which is a broadband noise, has energy at all frequencies. I played that continuously, measured right at the play yard location or the future play yard location, and then at each of these locations nearby. And then we use that to calculate the reduction from the source level to the receiver position at each location. And then we took the measured level, so we knew the reduction from point A to point B. We knew the source level because we measured how loud are the dogs barking at the Greenwood Village location. So we took that source level minus the reduction from point A to point B, that gives us the predicted level at point B from the dogs. So that's the basic methodology that was used to come up with those numbers.
And you went back to the location of the residential area as well?
Yep, so it includes right at the corner of the yards and then farther back to the north, more even with the distance to the home.
Okay. All right. That's it for me.
When you position the speakers to simulate the dogs barking in the exterior, in the back, and obviously there's the walls there, do you adjust for like the angle that they're barking? I don't know how dogs bark. They bark up, sideways, down.
Sure.
Do you take that into consideration?
Yes, we attempted to create the worst case scenario. So when we placed the speakers, we tried to actually push them as close as we could to the properties, but not all the way, because that would have increased the shielding effect of the retaining wall. If the source was right up against it, it's going to block even more sound. So we tried to put them in a position where it was as close to the houses as we could with as near of a direct line of sight as we could. And then the speakers are trapezoidal shape, so they were laid on their side, angled up at about approximately a 30-degree angle, and facing in the direction of the homes, is trying to create a worst-case scenario. We weren't trying to aim them back towards the Three Margaritas building or put them at the farthest corner of the play area. We tried to find the position where, okay, what's the least reduction they're going to get from the play yard to the neighbors.
And question, I'm sure the technology changes rapidly in terms of acoustics and measurement and so on. What types of devices are out there to monitor noise on a more permanent basis? Say the neighborhood was concerned about noise. Could there be monitoring placed out along the property line that would help monitor that noise level?
Sure, there's a number of meters available, different levels of quality of accuracy and sophistication when it comes to data logging. It can be a meter that's a few $100s that saves things to a data card, and then you have to download it to your computer, to more sophisticated meters that measure real time and even post it to a website so that anyone has access. So there's facilities like amphitheaters that have monitoring systems that are running full time so that the neighbors can log in and see what the actual level is at sometimes multiple positions. It can get pretty sophisticated.
Okay, thank you.
Couple questions. Do you remember how high that retaining wall is on the east side? Is it 18 feet, did I see?
I believe it's 18 or 20 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if in fact they put perimeter fencing around the pens, as was described, what type of fencing would you think that would be that would best mitigate noise level?
So in order to block sound, it needs to be solid and continuous. So something like a normal privacy fence that has gaps in between isn't going to block as much sound because it can get through the openings. So the barrier needs to be a solid wood. If you do overlapping boards, that works pretty well. Sometimes we've done fences with solid plywood or even other materials in there to improve the reduction. It doesn't take a whole lot of mass with dog barking because most of the sound is at mid or higher frequencies, and compared to, say, mechanical equipment where you have a lot of low-frequency noise, like a emergency generator or something like that, you need a lot more mass, like a concrete block wall, to effectively block the low frequency. So it doesn't need to be a really massive wall to be effective against a dog yard.
It does
not need to be as massive.
Okay, and then on page 7 of your report, I don't know, do you have that in front of you? Yes, right there. Could you explain this? It's toward the end of that paragraph at the top. It talks about at the locations near the home, we measured an ambient L90 level. And it goes on to say that the ambient level is above the predicted L10 levels from the dog's barking shown in 1. The ambient L10 level representative of a higher noise level when cars went by at these locations was at 68 decibels. So is that saying then that it's loudest when there are cars going by on Phillips when the dogs are barking?
That's saying that with no dogs, just what we measured currently, a car going by was as high as 68 at that position near the houses, which is well above the L10 predicted from the dogs barking.
So with those two together, that's pretty high. 68.
Yeah, but it's dominated by the traffic in that case.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Well, I went on the internet, and of course, everything on the internet is true. But I looked at a noise level chart. You're saying 68 is what you're projecting. Oh, that's a pun. The chart I see says 60 is the equivalent of a conversational speech. 70 is a shower running. Would you agree with that general description of 68 decibel rating?
Yes, and 68 is not the projected level, though. That would be the limit in this case. We're not projecting levels as high as that.
Okay. When you went out to test, probably didn't, but I'll ask anyway, did your test include any of the near neighbors and invite them to come out and see for themselves or hear for themselves?
No, we didn't speak to any of the neighbors when we were on site.
Might not be a bad idea for your future clients to do that.
Certainly.
What is the decibel rating that leaves the building, the interior of the building itself?
It's much lower than this, so it was low enough that it doesn't even add into the outdoor noise levels.
Yeah, but number, I mean, is it in the 20s or 30s, something along those lines, or less?
I think that's on page 6 here. Let me check. So we predicted 55.1 dBA in the parking lot next to the building from the interior noise levels. And that's, I think, about 20 dB below what we were predicting at the property, at the edge of the yard. So the noise from the inside would be approximately 20 dB less than the levels in figure 7, or on the figure 1 on page 7.
Okay. That's all the questions on noise I have. Is there any other questions about noise levels? Yes.
Yeah, so the chart on, or the illustration on page 7, figure 1, is the calculated L10 levels, but you had also done the pink noise and the dogs barking. Did you measure those decibel levels? Did you have measurements for those levels?
I don't have it.
From those locations?
I think I recorded and measured those levels for most locations, but I don't have it printed out here in front of me.
Just in case.
But you'll need to give me this because I don't have any.
Sorry, I was speaking to the Chair Pro Tem. Is there something lingering, or are we done? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, if the applicant can come back up, we'll go down the line and ask the rest of our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see. Go ahead, Jason.
No questions.
Oh, that's all?
Yep.
All sound,
It was
okay.
all noise.
All sound, no fury, yeah? Okay. Bruce?
No additional questions.
Okay. Robin?
Yes, so could you describe like an average day of how the barking would go? I mean, the dogs aren't silent. They're dogs. They're going to bark. So how would you describe that? They go out in the morning at 6:30. Is there a little barking then?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, like you said, it's not complete silence. However, like I stated in my presentation, because our dogs are together and they're with staff, they're not necessarily inclined to bark just to bark. Like you would hear a dog that's left alone, who is bored, who is lonely, who is anxious. We do get some excitement barking in the morning when they first get out, and they'll, kind of bark to each other in a playful manner. You hear a bark from one dog and a bark from another dog. So you do, and that's pretty typical throughout the day. You get a dog that'll bark and another dog that'll bark. But what we don't have is dogs that just bark, 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 and another dog bark, bark, bark back. Like you actually will frequently hear in neighborhoods dogs that kind of communicate with each other that are both stuck in their yards, and you hear a dog rah, 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 and the other rah, 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 and it's like they're communicating back and forth. That kind of barking we don't have. But you do have bits of barks and chirps and yelps and things, throughout the day. I would compare it to listening to a child daycare. We actually back up our Greenwood Village facility borders a child daycare, and we hear them a lot in the day when the kids are outside and they're laughing, and you hear some kids screaming and playing, and you can hear toys running around. It's very similar in noises to, I would say, listening to children outside playing.
So kind of like a recess, perhaps, at an elementary school?
I would say it's probably, that's probably quite a bit louder than our dogs. We, part of what we do when we have dogs in group, our staff is responsible to keep the excitement level down low. And we don't want dogs to get really excited because with excitement becomes a lot of barking, and it can also cause fights and altercations. There can be a fine line between excitement and rough play that can lead quickly to dogs having an altercation. So our staff really does a good job of keeping the excitement and the arousal level down low, so dogs are calm, walking around, hanging out. I would equate it to like having a conversation, a quiet conversation. We don't allow them to get very excited and run circles. We don't throw balls and toys for them. We want to keep them calm, and if you notice in any of the pictures that we're going through the slideshow, you see a lot of dogs that are hanging out. They walk around. They tend to just follow the group. Like I said, we keep them engaged in activities like group sits, going in and inside and outside, and group weights. And they're busy being mentally stimulated, so they tend to not make a lot of noise when they're doing that. That makes sense.
It does. So when the dogs do make noise and maybe carry on a little more than you think is, how are you quieting them? Is someone going up to them, or how's that done?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in my presentation, we use a technique called bummer. And that is when the staff person, so if you have a dog, say, for example, who is barking at a dog next to him to try and get him to play, and they'll bark, 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 to try and get that dog to engage in an activity with them, our staff person will leash that dog up and make them sit.
So they're not talking to the dog at this point, they're just quietly going over to the dog?
Correct. So they go up to the dog and say the dog's name is I'll use my own dog, Maple. They say, Maple, bummer, and use kind of a low monotonic tone of voice, leash up the dog. All of our staff is equipped with a lead. Make the dog sit, and they have to sit next to you quietly, and we don't give that dog any attention. Again, it'd be very similar to a child timeout for 30 seconds, and then they release the dog and allow them to go play again. If that dog repeats that behavior, the staff person follows through with another bummer, same technique, 30 seconds, and we have what's called like a 3-strike policy. So if the dog still doesn't get that behavior isn't allowed, we do a timeout. So we actually physically take the dog, remove them from the play group, and put them in a timeout room where they get a break. That break depends on the level of the violation. So some dogs go up for 10 minutes, some dogs will go up to timeout for up to 30 minutes, depending on what they did incorrectly. Does that make sense?
I'm mostly curious about the interaction with the individual when this first happens, because in our packet, on the Facebook page, one of the complaints from the apartment was listening to the people disciplining the dog and yelling at them. So, which seemed contrary to what you had originally described as your bummer. So
Correct.
That's why I was asking about that.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And in fact, we did have a complaint from a tenant or a resident in the neighboring apartment complex, and they were complaining specifically about the employee, not the dogs. Right. We did actually terminate that employee. We don't allow employees to yell and scream at dogs. Our policy is we remove fun. We don't add punishment. So positive punishment would be like yelling and screaming at a dog, using squirt bottles, using a sound machine to disrupt behavior. Those are techniques that we don't allow. So we just remove the dog from the situation using, like I mentioned, the bummer technique, and put the dog in timeout when we discipline a dog. So that person was not following our rules and was let go.
Thank you.
So, do you guys have any indoor play areas or just outdoor play areas?
We do have indoor play areas.
That's the pool, I mean.
Yeah, yep. Each outdoor yard has a corresponding indoor space. And so each group between the 3 yards can go inside and outside independently of the other yards. And sometimes during the day, depending on the variety of dogs that we have and the personalities, we'll actually subdivide a yard into 2 groups. So half the group will stay inside, the other half will be outside with their group. We tend to use our indoor yards during inclement weather, so if it's like a thunderstorm or it's really windy, but thankfully here in Colorado we have great weather. Most of the time we like to be outside, the dogs like to be outside, our staff enjoys being outside, and we have more space. So dogs are happier, they're more relaxed, having a bigger area to be in rather than being specifically in the indoor yards. Everybody likes the fresh air, likes being in the sun, so again, we tend to use our outdoor yards as much as possible.
Okay, so in looking at the schedule, I couldn't really tell. So if, so when are the dogs outside? If it's a nice day, are they outside immediately at 6:30? And are they outside, except for breaks and lunch and naps? Are they outside pretty much the whole day and then until somebody comes to get them?
Correct. So our dogs that come for daycare, again, unless we deem they need a break or a lunch, they're out in group for the entire day, their entire stay. Generally speaking, if we have good weather, like I said, we tend to spend most of our day outdoors. We do come inside periodically if it's hot, or our staff wants a change and, something to do and give their dog their group an activity of sitting and waiting and coming through the door one dog at a time. Again, that's something that we do frequently with our play groups. But generally speaking, we spend most of our time outdoors. Our dogs go out at 6:30, our dogs in hotel, and our daycare dogs, as they trickle in throughout the morning, usually most of them are there by, I'd say, between 9 and 10 a.m. The bulk of our dogs have arrived. I usually tell customers rush hour on the roads is kind of like rush hour in our store. Those are when dogs drop off in the morning, and then the same thing goes for the afternoon when they pick up and go home. So by 7 p.m., at the latest, usually about anywhere between 6:30 and 6:45, we put up dogs for the evening. Again, with everybody being inside at the latest 7 p.m. and our facilities closed.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. You in the site plan that's submitted with the application, there's a number of, I think, 4 or 5 outdoor areas shown in that area behind the building. And did you say, or maybe you didn't, whether or not those are staffed during the day? Is there somebody out in each one of those during the entire day? Or?
Correct. So each play area, anytime a dog is commingled with a dog outside of its family, so it can be as few as 2 dogs, up to 15 dogs is the maximum. They're required to be constantly supervised. But that's actually a rule that's set forth by the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Our facilities are licensed through the Colorado Department of Agriculture under a program called PACFA, Pet Animal Care Facilities Act. And one of those rules involves constantly supervising dogs when they're commingled. So unless they're in their hotel room by themselves, they have to be constantly supervised by at least one person. Again, over 15 dogs, we have 2 people. So it depends. We always have to maintain those ratios of no more than 15 dogs with one person at a time, whether they're inside or outside.
Okay. And then as far as the size and location of those play areas, you're showing them in that the area with the wall. How, I guess, important or flexible in terms of your site planning is it to have those in that particular location and that size and area? Say it made more sense to locate the outdoor areas closer to County Line Road where there's more ambient noise. Is there any flexibility in that? We wouldn't need to determine that as part of this hearing, but maybe as part of a conditional use. Is there flexibility in your planning with something like that? As far as the exact location and size of those play areas?
Is that something that you want to talk about? Our architect may be able to better answer that than me.
Good evening, Steve Brown. I'm with Near Design and Planning. It would kind of depend. It's limited along County Line. There's only a certain amount of width over there. So it would kind of depend. Obviously, Steve and Carrie like to have pretty ample areas to have these dog play areas. As we get around to the south side of that building, it's much more constricted. We're also going to expand the building a little bit. And then there's also some drainage facilities that come out from County Line that will be dealt with the site plan. I'm a little, it would need to be evaluated as what would need to be done. Could we potentially go a little farther? Yeah, and it kind of depends on the final layout and the sizes that would be obtained on the south side.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Sherry, you have anything?
I think all my questions were answered. Thank you.
Just one question, if you keep it real brief here. I noticed that only 4 people showed up for the neighborhood meeting. Rules and regulations of the city says you have to give notice? Any reason why only 4 showed up when we have all these people tonight waiting to speak?
Yeah, we followed the city's requirements in terms of mailing out notification and posting. I think it was. I think we had to post something at the site. And I think we did mailers as well, from what I can recall. It's been a while now. But we actually rented a location at a church that I was able to get. When we actually expected more people to come as well. So we were quite surprised when just a handful of people showed up. However, we did get the names and some of the addresses of the people that did attend. And actually, our feedback was very supportive and very positive. We were quite surprised to have all the negative feedback that came, later on in this process, because at the neighborhood meeting, it was very positive.
Okay, leave it at that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
Okay, we've been at this for almost 2 hours. We're going to take a 7-minute break exactly. And then we'll get into speakers. Again, your 3 minutes to speak. So be back in 7. Next up on the agenda is the public giving their 3-minute speech. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. When you have, give your name and your address, please. When you have 30 seconds left, the yellow card will be held up. When your 3 minutes up, the red card will be held up. We had one request for a speaker that needs to, an emergency needs to get going. If we can put her first.
Hi, my name is Sarah D'Annunzio, and I live at 7511 South Logan Drive. My neighbor and I are here speaking upon the doggy daycare that is behind our home, and it has been the worst experience I have ever had in my life, from smell to noise, unwilling to work with us. The smell that comes through is anywhere between a feces, just the fecal matter, and a cleaning agent. She talked about a cleaning agent, and I don't know the one that they were using, but I wonder if it's any similar to that one. Atrocious. I mean, we couldn't even have people in our backyard over for, afternoon anything, because it smelled so terrible. They did talk about, dogs barking with a 6-minute interval. I found one that barked for 3 solid hours. And, they always say, oh, we'll do the sound check, And, I'll listen to music all day long, but a dog barking constantly for 3 hours makes you want to pull your hair out. It's awful. Those are my biggest complaints, was the sound and the smell from a neighbor that has had to go through this. And ours is actually in the process of moving, and we couldn't be more thankful, because we talked about selling our home, and he also brought the comment up that it does not lower your property. Unfortunately, it does. When someone comes in, they don't want to have a dog barking 24/7 in their backyard. Nobody does. And I actually am a dog owner. We have 2 of our own dogs. So I'm, pro dogs, I'm pro business, I own my own business. I just think it needs to be in the right place and considerate of your neighbors. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'll read off the names, and then I'll tell the next person that's in the bullpen ready to come up. I'll also say whether most of the people have said whether they're for or against it. This could get rather repetitive with all the speakers if I say your name and you say you're against it, but you can say you do not wish to speak, or you say I agree with the previous 6 speakers. Second up is Frank Butler, followed by Sherry Butler.
We actually have 5 speakers to this slideshow.
Can we bring them all 5 up and hit 3, 3, 3, 3, 3?
Sorry, you have 3.
We have a slideshow and 5 speakers here that are aligned with this slideshow. And although I see we're out of order there, do you mind if we just bring them up?
You 2 have 3 minutes to speak, so.
Okay, well,
but it starts with.
We'd like to go out of order.
It starts with, the
Okay.
slideshow starts with her.
All right, so we've got Amy.
It was the sign-up sheet. I'm sorry.
All right, so we got Amy, is that you?
You.
Good evening. My name is Amy Fielding, 609 East Phillips Drive South in Littleton, 80122. And thank you. I did swing by Hobnob Daycare on Saturday, January 18th at 3:30, and this is a poor recording quality, but I'm playing it just to illustrate kind of the consistent stream of barking that I heard when I was there. And I wanted to say I'm not specifically opposed to Hobnob. You're very passionate about your business and dogs. But what I am opposed to is allowing permanent outdoor use at the Oakbrook Shopping Center site. The original development plan for Highland Square Oakbrook Commercial Center site has done a really great job protecting the quality of life of us, of the Oakbrook residents. And the clause forbidding outdoor use has helped keep the noise level down for our Oakbrook community. So I live 3/10 of a mile from the proposed site, and amending the site development plan means, without a doubt, and what we heard, we will hear noise, I will hear noise. And this is a quality of life issue for us. We are an active community of neighbors, of friends. You saw us all talking to each other and greeting each other, and we like to be outside, enjoying the outdoors. On the previous slide, one of the neighbors, Alan, dressed up as the Easter Bunny and came. We were doing an Easter egg hunt outside. We play in slip and slides in the summer months. The kids are all over the place outside. And it's not just kids, it's the adults. Come drive our street. You will see Adirondack chairs and benches out in front. We read out front. We sit out front. We want to be outside. And there are 5 families that I know of within 4/10 of the proposed site that have spent tens of thousands of dollars on our landscaping. We have invested in our homes and in Oak Brook, and we want to be outside enjoying that. And we just don't want to hear noise from the shopping center. And certainly at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday in the warm months when we sleep with the windows open, I don't want to hear dogs barking at 6:30 in the morning. None of us do. So in 1983, the Oak Brook Shopping Center Development Plan supported and has protected the quality of life of the Oak Brook neighborhood. And the Planning Committee tonight has the ability to please continue to protect us by not allowing the permanent outdoor use in the Oak Brook Shopping Center. I ask you, all of the commissioners and members of this council, please to reject any amendments to changing the site development plan. Thank you.
Thank you. You put up the next name, please.
He's right there.
Hi, my name's Don Johnson.
Okay.
I reside at 548 East Phillips Drive North. I'm here to talk a little bit about the PD and the application intent, which is, a lot of this is already you brought up earlier in previous conversations tonight, but this was parcel 1B, and like they discussed, under the B2 district. And it said, follow all the rules except arcades, automotive repairs, gas pump use, separate fast food restaurants, and also it said, or permanent outdoor uses was listed as an exception to B2 district. Then according to the comprehensive plan for the South neighborhood, Goal 4, which was also brought up earlier this evening, talked about the residential and recreational areas from negative visual and audible intrusions of commercial and industrial development. Listed on there is barking, which is under Littleton Code 626, mechanical noise based on industrial fans, visual outdoor play area for 150 dogs in full view. We're going to have odor nuisance, airborne infection disease as possible with outdoor animals. Also talking about, I read the January 7th WAVE report on the noise, and he said one dog did exceed if it's barking. So one dog could be barking 1 minute and another dog the next minute. And what I've noticed, I'm retired now, and I'm outside a lot, and there's a lot of dogs in the neighborhood, and you hear one dog, something sets it off, and it's a chain reaction through the whole neighborhood, because we have a lot of dogs. I'd say over 50% of the people in that neighborhood have dogs. And you'll hear one dog start barking, and it's chain reaction through the whole neighborhood. And so this will be another source to set off the dogs in the neighborhood. Also with noise, we've got C470 coming through, and we weren't approved a sound barrier. So with the additional traffic coming through with that tollway, our ambient noise is going to be going up as it is. And now we're going to have additional noise coming from potential dog barking. Also, next slide. This is talking about the goal number 3 under the South Neighborhood Plan is to provide adequate vehicular access to and from the industrial areas. And with the addition of a traffic light coming to Clarkson and County Line, we're going to have people circumventing the rush hour traffic. And looking at the study that was done, the peak hours were at 4:30 to 5:30 for the afternoon rush, and from 8 to 9 in the morning as far as supporting this dog care facility. And that's already our busiest time. Trying to get out on County Line at those times without a light is not good. Thank you.
Give your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Krista Forrest.
Speak right into the microphone.
I reside at 610 East Phillips Drive South. I don't feel this is a creative and efficient use of land and public-private service. It's not providing a greater variety and mix to our city of Littleton. There are 15 other dog boarding, grooming, and businesses within 5 miles. 12 of them are already located within Littleton. 3 of them are within 1 mile of this proposal. 2 others are in the same center with a vet hospital and a groomer. There's nothing creative about putting competing businesses in a neighborhood that serve, in the same shopping center that serves a neighborhood. Is it in the intent of the City and Planning Council to envision a reduction in Oak Brook home values, an envision to reducing neighborhood quality of life? You have a theoretical sound study which includes numerous estimates. What happens when that's completely wrong and my family can no longer enjoy my outdoor space? During the summer, we eat every single meal outside, well, outside work, morning and dinner. We eat outside. I'm located approximately 150 feet from this. Of the 13 closest homes, 1 adult has home offices at each address, thereby experiencing this noise 24 hours a day. My husband works from home. It means he can't have the windows open when he's at home because he's on calls a lot. He's on conferences. It would be nonstop nuisance and annoyance for him to constantly hear dogs barking. So, I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Trip Butler. I live at 507 East Phillips Drive North in Littleton's Oak Brook neighborhood, along with my wife and 3 children, 2 of which attend Powell Middle School. I have no disrespect toward Hobnob whatsoever. However, I have strong issues against the poor fit any dog daycare facility expecting to house 150 dogs daily every single day will be for my neighborhood, the south neighborhood of the Littleton Comprehensive Plan. In accordance with the specific standards and regulations of the B2 designation, any permanent outdoor uses are not permitted. In fact, the land use table specifically shows that barking is a particular type of noise since it limits the boarding of small animals to enclosed structures. The authors included this restriction out of respect for the residents nearby. This is the entire reason for zoning altogether. It is a covenant between the city and its citizens to give up some property rights for the benefit of certainly knowing what's going on next door. Barking dogs is certainly exactly what the council had in mind when they said no permanent outdoor uses. The Hobnob Pet Care Study shows that they measured the sound level inside and outside of Hobnob, located on Arapahoe Road. There's no mention of how many dogs were actually inside or outside, only that there were approximately 100 throughout the facility. Finally, in their aerial image, to indicate the sound of 150 dogs spread throughout the facility, they indicate it will be equivalent to the sound of a running shower at their property line and a running refrigerator at my property lining. Does anybody in this room believe that 150 dogs in an outdoor play area across the street will be as innocuous as a running shower? A random day, a random number of dogs, indoors or out, an estimate to this just for 150 dogs, subtract for this, subtract for that, subtract because 100 dogs will stop barking at the same time throughout most of the day. Why doesn't the sound study just account for the real worst case scenario, 150 dogs in the outdoor play area? Those decibel levels are well documented on the internet. The answer is 115 decibels. And how about adding for prevailing winds, or the fact that dogs can hear 4 times better than humans? Once the Oak Brook dogs hear their buddies across the street, the noise nuisance will be epic. When my neighbor's dogs across the street bark enough to disturb my concentration, I'm entitled to call the city and request intervention. How can we even be considering breaking the city's promise to respect the planned development of the south neighborhood by changing the zoning to allow for 150 dogs right across the street? We do not need a theoretical or incomplete noise study to estimate the impact of barking when there are 2 dog daycare facilities already located nearby. A running refrigerator. Please ask our neighbors adjacent to Floppy Dog if that sounds like a running refrigerator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Sherry Butler. I live at 507 East Phillips Drive North. To understand a business, what I did is I went to their associations. I looked at their magazines, I looked at their articles, I read books written by the gals that were in the business. As you can see from this slide, at the fourth quarter article from Pet Care Quarterly, the #1 article was infectious disease transmission by air. So that infectious disease is going to come blowing right across our backyards. Now, I know that it's all well and said and quiet that the little doggies go in to have their nap time and everything, but the common plague group problems, as written by Bennett and Briggs, A Complete Guide to Safety, and they both own doggy daycares. Common playgroup problems: traffic by cars and passerbys, facility tours, dog changes, so when they're coming and going in and out of the rooms, sirens, squirrels. A dog's bark, as per OSHA, is 115 decibels. I personally don't understand the sound study. I would have loved to have heard it, but I think it's a lot of estimation when in reality, I went to visit Hobnob. I went there on January 15th at 1:15. I got there, I walked in, barking dogs, bark, bark, bark. I met with the gal, I said I wanted my dog to come there. She was very nice. She showed me the TVs and everything. She showed me the green pool. I said, boy, the dogs are really barking in here. It was 1:15. She goes, yeah, sometimes they're excited. I go, yeah. And so then I'm looking at the staff in the backyards with the dogs, and they're back there, and the dogs are barking. I was there for 30 minutes. I never once heard a quiet moment. I say to you that it's absurd to think that we're not going to hear it. And it's absurd to think that our houses that are $500,000 are going to retain their value, and we're going to have quiet, peaceful enjoyment of our land. And that's why those authors of that of the PD said no outdoor play areas.
Does that end your list of speakers?
That is the end of our speakers.
Okay. If I repeat your name again, say you already spoke. Frank Butler? You spoke. And Sherry? Okay. Matthew Lehman is against the project. Do you wish to speak? Yes. Come on down. If you state your name and address, please.
My name is Matthew Lehman, and I do not live in Oak Brook, but I am a property owner, and I own a property on 8115 South Logan Drive. My tenants were here representing, and I would like to voice one of their concerns as well. I have my own, but my tenants' #1 concern was the odor. My house is the second house around the corner, which is closest to where this facility is. Their backyard backs up to. There's one house on the corner that's closer, and I'm the next house to it, facing to the north. So the backyard faces toward this facility. I'd like to preface something in, I love dogs. I'm not a dog hater, I promise. And I want dogs to be well cared for. But I want to share, I had another concern, and I'm just going to relate a personal story. In our own neighborhood, we had one dog who was left out in their backyard by himself, all day, and this dog barked for hours on end. And my neighbor and I, who live next door to each other, were retired. We spend a lot of time outdoors, and this dog would bark for literally 4 to 6 hours, just nonstop. I thought about calling the police and filing a complaint, but I thought I don't want to be that kind of a neighbor. So I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to go talk to the neighbor personally. The reason this dog was out was because the owners were working and gone all day. Now, I realize they'll have people there, but here's the problem. You all are focused so much on the technical aspect, the decibel level, but there's something you're not considering. It wasn't the loudness of this dog barking, it was the constantness of this dog barking that drove us crazy. Decibel-wise, we were okay with that. It was hours on end that drove us crazy. And to give you an idea what happened is before we even had a chance to go talk to this neighbor about their dog, apparently they had received too many complaints, and the police had gone to their address too many times, and they were forced to either get rid of the dog or do something with the dog. And as a result, they had to have surgery and have the dog's vocal cords clipped. I'm not in favor of that. I do not like having to, perform a surgical procedure on a dog because it can't control its own bark. So I'm against that, but the noise is my number one concern. And I think it is, and one of the things that had me come down here, I live in Westminster, and one of the things that had me drive down here was the fact that I didn't feel like there was good disclosure or complete openness about what was going to happen at this facility. Nowhere did I hear until just recently that there was going to be up to 150 dogs in this facility. And I want to know, why was that not brought up early on? So I feel like full disclosure wasn't done here. And maybe that's why they only had 4 people show up at the first or last meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ben Burke is against it. Do you wish to speak? Yes, please. Okay. And again, not disparaging any of the potential speakers here, but if you agree with everyone else and wish to just say, I agree, that would speed things up a little bit, but everybody will have the 3 minutes if they want. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Ben Burke. I live at 559 East Kettle Avenue. I'm the president of the Oak Brook Homeowners Association, which abuts the shopping center we're talking about tonight. And I'm here in that capacity representing the interests and perspectives of my constituents who live near the location of this proposed zoning change. The HOA board has not received any positive feedback on this zoning change and considerable negative feedback, as you've heard. They are worried about obviously the negative impact to their quality of life and their property values, and I won't elaborate further on that, or the 3 main causes for concern, specifically the odor potential, the uncertainty on sound and sound mitigation, as well as the traffic and the disruption to the current traffic patterns. So in my capacity as president of the Oak Brook HOA, I'm urging you to maintain current zoning in this tract and not approve this. The Planning Commission should leave a business such as a doggy daycare to an area where larger setbacks between businesses and residential areas can be achieved, such as the case at the other Hobnob locations. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next up is Dennis McCann, followed by W. Donovan, I think it is. Come on down. You wish to speak?
I'll go in his place when he comes up.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
I don't have to take too much of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Barry Bender. I am a resident of Lone Tree, 10630 Montecito Drive. I operate a business out of Greenwood Village. I am a client of Carrie Schwartz and have been since the day she opened her Greenwood Village property. I came to share with you and with all of you who are concerned, obviously, about what may come down in your neighborhood, my experiences. Carrie put on a beautiful presentation. I saw some people sort of snickering and the implication being that perhaps what she said wasn't exactly factual. What I can tell you is the pictures that you saw absolutely represent how that property looks on a day-to-day basis, day or night, weekdays, weekends. I can tell you that from a personal standpoint, my 2 puppies actually love that facility. They go in rambunctious, they come home tired, sleep, get up, wash, repeat, the dogs do it again. If they don't get an opportunity to do it, I spend the day in heck. I can tell you that their discussion about the training and the particular way that they deal with the dogs, whether they be trouble dogs or not, is very accurate. One of my dogs tends to be a little persnickety, and he gets in timeout from time to time. And I will tell you that the staff is very cognizant of what's going on with each dog. They make we, the owners, very aware of it. If there's a problem, they make us aware of that. And if there is a consistent problem, they let us know that if we can't change the dog's behavior with the assistance of we will not be there. So I believe that the integrity and the intention and the game plan that Carrie has put together truly represents what she does in action. That I would tell you that for 5 years I've been a client there. I have had numerous conversations with other clients. I have yet to find one client who had a bad experience. All of us love the option there. I realize that doesn't address the homeowners association's concerns about diminution of value. The noise I can't address, but there was a gentleman here who was an expert, and I thought he did a pretty good job of it, even though it was over my head in many ways. So all I can tell you is, and thank you for letting me speak out of turn, I would take Carrie at her word. If she says she's going to do something, she will, and she will work with the community if there's a problem, and she operates with a tremendous amount of care and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. W. Donovan is against it. Next up is Don Johnson. I ask you to speak into the microphone, but not too close.
Hi, my name's Bill Donovan. I reside at 780 East Phillips Drive South, Littleton, Colorado. I'm against it for all the reasons mentioned above. I'd like to address 2 points, specifically, possibly 3 if I have the time. The first one is I ride my bicycle down the hill, the access from Phillips Drive. I have never seen a application. I saw the posting for the other one. I don't believe it was posted. The second thing is I'm very concerned about odor. I don't think the sewer system in the shopping center has been sized properly. The reason for that is when I drive there on cold, still days and nights, there's an odor. I worked in the water department. I'm a licensed engineer. I actually know what sewer gas smells like. And there's sewer gas being emitted along the sewer line there. I'm concerned with adding another 150 dogs, that'll be a major concern. Okay, anybody who's owned a dog, think about your garbage pail after 1 week with dog feces in it, and then multiply it times 150. This is a disease vector. There's no measurement of volatile organic compounds or smells in the city of Littleton. Can you help me there? Is there any smell or odor regulations in the zoning commission regulations? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Don Johnson, followed by Rebecca. You spoke? Okay. Thank you, Don. Rebecca, Ale, I can't see the name. Sounds right. I agree with everything that's been said. I'm completely against. Okay. Thank you. Next up is Donald E-N-S-E-R-S, who's against the project. Well, it doesn't say. Is he here? I guess not. Dave Schwerenson, I think, is against the project.
Close enough. Schwieso.
Okay.
Thank you.
I always complain
Sure.
about...
S-C-H-W-I-E-S-O-W. And I live at 8601 South Logan Drive.
Thank you.
I'm going to look at, I have nothing against the business. I think it's a good business. I'm just not happy with the location. I'm looking at it from a little bit of a different point of view. We've talked about a large number of dogs all barking at the same time and all that. But I look at the Littleton Code, the 626, and it doesn't mention anything about numbers of dogs or volume. It's basically, is it a nuisance? And one dog barking is a nuisance. And if there's one dog barking at that facility, I know I'm not going to be happy because I'm the fourth house in from the corner. And I don't even know how we would go about protesting that. I mean, we already have problems with the Ford dealer and their changes. They don't live up to what they said they're going to do. And I don't know how to enforce it without going and banging on the door with these folks. But I would look at it as a different point of it's just one dog barking is going to bother us. And I really don't think that this belongs in that area. The traffic, the corner of Phillips and Logan, County Line, it's extremely difficult to get out in the morning or in the evening. I think it's just a matter of time before we have more accidents there with all the traffic congestion. And that's all I've got. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Megan Wilson, who's against the application, wishes to speak, obviously. On deck is Amy Fielding.
Amy already spoke.
Okay.
My name is Megan Wilson. I live at 729 East Phillips Drive South in Littleton, in the neighborhood in the yellow circle of the facility. I agree with all of the prior comments that the speakers noted about the sound study and the sound concerns. A sound study that is commissioned by the applicant, by definition, is a biased study, and I don't think accounts for, in the photos of the other Hobnob facilities, the dogs are on elevated platforms. And from my interpretation of what I heard of the sound study, it didn't necessarily account for the dogs at that elevated positioning if they were barking while on those platforms. It was more focused on the dogs being down at a lower ground level in this kind of by the retaining wall area. And I also appreciate the applicant saying that if they lived in the neighborhood, they would likewise be here voicing opposition to this application. I think that comment spoke volumes to me. But I want to speak beyond my support of the significant sound concerns to the traffic concerns. With the increased traffic of 470 and County Line, we have already seen increased traffic on Phillips as people are trying to cut around or skirt around County Line and kind of change the routes that they routinely take. I have children that go to Powell. There are many kids in our neighborhood that go to Powell, meaning they are walking and crossing Phillips a couple of times a day or riding their bikes across Phillips. And the volume of traffic is only going to increase in there. I am every day concerned that my kids are going to make it to school safely or make it home safely and not get hit by a car that is speeding down Phillips because they're rushing to get to work or they're rushing to get home from work and they're distracted and not paying attention. And I am deeply concerned about the increased volume that we will see through the neighborhood on Phillips because it is an easy route for people to take to get around this part of the town and the safety concern that that provides for the kids going to Powell, which was one of the reasons why we moved to the neighborhood. The quality of life that has been spoken to and the quality of education of Littleton Public Schools and Powell specifically was one of the reasons that we moved to this neighborhood 15 years ago and have enjoyed living in the neighborhood for as long as we have. And I am really genuinely concerned about the safety of kids going back and forth to Powell and the increased traffic as we're just walking the neighborhood and enjoying our environment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Did Chad Fielding speak already? Okay, you're opposed and do not wish to speak. Thank you. I'm not going to, I'll give it a shot. Alan, and his last name starts with a T, is
Alan Tuckfeld.
Is against the project, wishes to speak, obviously. Next up is Joanne.
UCH, T as in Thomas, UCHFELD. You're welcome. I'm Alan Tuckfeld. I live at 527 East Phillips Drive. My house backs to Phillips Avenue, which will also back to the facility. I also want to state that I'm a Colorado licensed certified residential appraiser, although I'm not here in any way, shape, or form as an appraiser. But based on my 20 years plus experience and expertise, given the situation of the facility and where it's going to be located, the houses that are located backing to Phillips Avenue will certainly be affected as far as value is concerned, which will then affect all the interior houses as well. I have 2 dogs. My dogs bark. I can just imagine what 100+ dogs will sound like as well. I do office out of my home, so I'm one of those people that will be in the house more than some others, and the noise level itself will definitely have an impact. People have been mentioning odor. I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the amount of elevated traffic that's going to take place because of the facility being located there, especially at the hours that they've acknowledged will have a high impact as far as traffic is concerned. Early morning and later on in early evening, which basically is, you know, breakfast time, getting people off to work and off to school in the morning, and also dinner hour in the evening. The gentleman that spoke before who had to leave early was talking about how well the facility that his dogs attend is taken care of, and I'm sure that the facility is very well run. I would like to have asked that gentleman how would he like to have a house that backed to that facility, and the possible potential noise effect that that facility would have on his home and his lifestyle. I guess I could ask the same question of each of you, and I'm not trying to be nasty or anything like that, but if you were faced with the same situation that basically we're all faced with, especially those people that do have houses that back to Phillips Avenue and to the facility, faced with the situation of odor and noise and traffic and all of that situation, how would you feel about having that facility behind your home? Thank you so much for allowing me to talk.
Thank you. Joanne Johnson, against project, wishes to speak. On deck is Gary. Gary.
Hi, my name is Joanne Johnson. I live at 593 East Nova Avenue, which is one of those interior houses. We're about 2 blocks away from Phillips Avenue, and while I agree with everything else that has been said, my primary concern is the increased traffic in the area. You guys have all visited the shopping center. Everybody here has driven County Line Road. You guys know, especially during rush hour, how difficult it is to get in and out of that shopping center during rush hour. So I can pretty much guarantee that we will have increased traffic, which means increased noise and also increased danger to the children who live in our neighborhood. My husband and I picked this neighborhood about 1 year and 3 months ago, partly because it's so quiet. And, you know, like I watch all the 3 boys who live next door, they ride their bikes up and down our road. You know, we're going to have our firstborn in August, and so I'm just worried about what that increased traffic through the neighborhood is going to be. So that's my primary concern. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Gary's last name starts with a W, and Harriet. Agree to, are you opposed? Okay, thank you. Next up is, holy cow.
It's Krista.
Krista? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, as Barry Bender already spoke in your place, so you are Dennis McCann? Yes. Great.
Dennis McCann, 9555 East Arapahoe Road, Greenwood Village. I don't have any involvement with this project that's going on, but I am a neighbor. We're 50 feet from their outside play yard. The back of my business, my porch, and I have a restaurant and a bar. There's 5 other restaurants along there. As far as the smell, I'm going to address the smell and then the noise. We've never had any complaints from any of our customers. I've been there for 25 years. They've been there for 6 years. The other thing, their dumpster is 18 feet from my back door. I've never had a smell problem. And so, again, I'm not involved in this. I'm just a neighbor that came to say that, you know, these guys do a good job. They take care of their business, and they run a hell of a business. Nothing's ever been impacted by us. They even have the restaurant in front of them. So Tri-County Health Department's not going to let something go on that would be, you know, problems for the public health. So I just wanted to come and say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Johnson? Wishes to speak. On deck is David Schwain.
Josh Johnston, I live at 7501 South Logan Drive. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective, as some people have said, nothing against dogs, have dogs. I'm all about capitalism, entrepreneurialism. I work in the medical field, legal field, I've worked in real estate, but I sit right next to a doggy daycare. So first of all, if what they have kind of pitched and promised is true, I think it sounds great. I just think that ideally you can consider recourse if it's not true, because it has not been my experience. So I'll try to go fast, but this is dictated as it's happening. This has been my life over the past couple of years. Wednesday morning, 5:57 a.m., dogs barking, shrill, high-pitched. I'm lying in my bed and I hear it. Next morning, afternoon, got home at 3:38, and guess what? I literally step out of my car in the front driveway. I hear dogs barking. I go inside to let my dog outside, and with the sliding glass door open, I hear the dogs barking in my house like I always do. It continues 10 minutes. I have to go to the basement and turn on the TV, so I can't hear anything. At 4:57, so 20 minutes later, I go upstairs, and the dogs are still barking. 6:38, dogs barking in the AM, woke me up after a Red Rocks concert. Ongoing craziness, high-pitched, multiple dogs. I stopped keeping track at 7:17 a.m., so 40 minutes later, it is a frantic yelping. I took audios. 7:43 a.m., over an hour later, still barking. I had to turn on my television so that I could not hear it, and I'm trying to work. I am still hearing barking now at 9:04 a.m. So this goes on and on and on, but just gives you an idea. This is incessant. It really destroyed my life for a long time. The city, unfortunately, was not helpful at all. We had to get mediation involved. I had to hire an attorney, had to threaten litigation. It was an absolute nightmare. The city, unfortunately, in my experience, was not on the residential side. They were very much on the pro-business side. I had just spent $15,000 buying new windows, so I hope everyone potentially plans for that again if things don't go as planned. I literally spent $15,000 to put new windows in to mitigate the dog sound. These dogs aren't even outside, they're inside the building. I would strongly urge you quickly, you have to not pay attention to the decibels. The decibels do not matter. I work in accident reconstruction, and it's like we pitch a lot of physics and math, and it sounds good. It's not reality. It's not the decibels, it's the pitch, it's the timbre, it's the tone. It goes right to the back in your brain, and I lived in a sympathetic mode for over a year and a half. This doggy daycare is moving. They were only moving because I had to threaten litigation again. So again, I hope it all works out. I don't know what the answer is, but I would just strongly urge that if it is not as they are promising, that's a lot of dogs, and there needs to be some way to mitigate it. Otherwise, it could get nasty. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up, David, I think it's Schwan.
I think he left.
Oh. I don't see anyone answering. Okay. Jeremy Manning, against the project? Looks like he wishes. Okay. And by the way, if you haven't signed up or you signed up on the wrong sheet and you didn't sign up on the right sheet, we'll get you to, we'll ask if there's anyone else who wishes to speak. So go ahead.
Okay. Jeremy Manning, I'm at 608 East Phillips Court. Several concerns. Most of my neighbors have echoed all those, but wanted to kind of reiterate. One, I never received notification of the neighborhood meeting, but I did from City of Littleton. So 700 feet to the applicant is not what 700 feet is to the city. I worked in GIS for many years, so I know kind of measurement distance. So we might have avoided this if we got input on the front end. Oh, sorry. The other is, The noise, which everybody's brought up to, traffic. There is only one place to turn left onto County Line Road from the shopping center. Right next to Waffle House and the Faux Restaurant, you can only turn right. That's going to drive all the traffic onto Phillips Ave, where my daughter walks to school, where a lot of these people's kids walk to school. That is a big concern. I've called the city of Littleton and my city council member to complain about speed on Phillips Ave, people blowing through the four-way stop sign. So it's a problem already. When you put a ton of rush hour traffic with drop-off pickup, you're going to exacerbate that significantly. Pardon me, I kind of get nervous. Turning left from that Phillips Ave to County Line is a dicey proposition anyway. There's a terrible line of sight from where Wilmore Nursery is, so I would hope there would be a traffic study to see what kind of traffic improvement might be needed, like an intersection controlled by light. So again, just to reiterate, noise, traffic, and smell are my big concerns. Okay. Thank you. Whoops.
Thank you. That concludes everybody that signed up. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Come on down, sir. You state your name and address and speak reasonably close to the microphone. Thank you.
My name is Paul Malinowski. I live at 8085 South Logan Drive. I'm the fifth house around the corner. And although I'm here as a concerned neighbor, I am against the project, not the business per se, but the project. Maybe I have a little different perspective too, because in a past life, I was a city planner sitting in Elizabeth's seat and a real estate developer. And I understand working with site development plans. And this entire Oak Brook development, commercial development, falls under the 1983 site development plan. And I would urge the commissioners to become familiar with it tonight, if you haven't been. Site development plans were invented, if you will, to allow a community and a developer to negotiate different points, and they can compromise on open space versus traffic, et cetera. And many site development plans, including this, talk about development objectives, and that is in here. And there was indeed, it was brought up that one of the objectives of that site development plan is that there's the desire to be sensitive to the adjacent neighborhood. This concern is critical to the overall success of the project. So I would urge all of you to think about that. Does this really fit into the sensitivity of the adjacent neighborhood? And don't just focus. Staff did a good job of whittling it down to the three key elements of this proposal, but you have to look at it in terms of the entire development plan. There's also talked about traffic in there. One of the things it talks about in the traffic is that only minor access points occur on Phillips and are to be used primarily for office use and some minor access to retail use. This would not be minor access to retail use. And I was pleased to hear one of the gentlemen talk about left-hand turns from Phillips on the county line, as well as you go from Phillips to Logan Drive, which sort of becomes a collector street because people have figured out the shortcut from county line to Mineral is Logan Drive. It's not Broadway. Last, I want to, my personal thing is about height, and that is certainly one of the things that they're asking for. That section right there used to have the best scenic view of the mountains in Littleton, period. Bar none. I know I'm also a professional photographer and I have won awards for a photo from that spot. That veterinary hospital is totally ruining that as it is. This will totally ruin it. If you look at that slide you had called application and intent, add 5 feet to that and you'll see what I mean. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
My name is Joe Kalupa. I'm the vice president of our HOA, and one of my jobs is to enforce the covenants of our community. And it is a covenant-controlled community that this is backing up against. I agree with all the people that have spoken against, but I also have to say that in our community, one barking dog habitually is considered a nuisance, and we get a letter to that person, we get a second letter. We try not to get the law involved, but of course we can if we need to. This is a zero-tolerance community, and we do that because we enjoy living, coming home, eating in the backyard, or eating in our on our front step, and try to be quiet, not listen to barking dogs. And I understand that we can compare that to traffic. Traffic is normal in a community, but barking dogs, as somebody already pointed out, is a completely different noise, and it's irritating to hear somebody's dog barking. One other note, my wife and I were sitting in our front yard one day. We like to have a glass of wine on our front step, watch the children playing in the neighborhood and stuff, and we started hearing this dog barking. And we didn't know whose it was, so we said, well, let's jump in the car and see. We actually drove 6 blocks, and it sounded like it was in our backyard. Dog barking does carry, so that's a major concern, and everybody's addressed the noise and the smell and stuff like that, and I also wrote a letter on behalf of the HOA to each of you commissioners, so please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm sorry?
2 more people.
Sir? Excuse me, we're continue.
Hi, my name's Duke Sevier, 8075 South Logan Drive. And I'm going to reiterate some of what my neighbors already said about the Ford dealership. I mean, it's constant alarms going off periodically throughout the day. You could be out and hear all the car alarms going off, and sometimes they get to it pretty quick, but sometimes it could be a minute or two before they get to it. Ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard a car alarm go off, boom, it's just like, you know, you jump out of your chair, you jump out, you know, it's very annoying. And I didn't think that was going to happen when you all approved and the litigation between the parties took place. But another thing my neighbors didn't mention is on our street, Logan Drive, South Logan Drive, excuse me, we already have speed bumps. And obviously they're there to slow down the traffic like they mentioned, but they didn't mention the speed bumps. Well, I mean, and I come and go from the neighborhood quite a bit during the day, and you could see people flying down our street 30, 35, 40 miles per hour. And at the end of Logan Drive, where it cuts off to the left to get to Logan Street, to get back to Mineral, it's ridiculous. People just, you know, they come in and they think they're like on a Grand Prix race car circuit, you know, and it's like, I drive a F-250. If they hit me, they're going to be the ones that are going to be in pain, not me. So I think that's something. Also, I'm an avid gardener, and the smells that you get coming from the shopping center, you know, you have the Indian restaurant, you have the barbecue restaurant, probably even the Vietnamese restaurant. I don't know which smells are coming, but I mean, that you can sit there and just smell all that coming constantly. And I would prefer that smell than any dog smell. And I mean, I do landscaping for a living, so I walk into people's backyard and you can tell immediately that they don't pick up after their dog. And it's a very annoying smell. And also, I guess furthermore, I don't see how this would really benefit Littleton. It seems like it would be more of a benefit to like Highlands Ranch and now the huge development out in Roxborough for all the people just driving through, and it's not going to really be very beneficial to us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Come on down.
Brad Camp, I live at 8105 South Logan Drive. My property backs up to the Auto Nation parking lot. I was here about a year ago when it all came up with Auto Nation. They promised, they had a great presentation, they promised great things, and we have talked to them 4 times on the amendments that they said they would hold. They are not holding. My concern in this situation is similar. Great case studies, great guidelines, great presentation, but once they're going to promise the moon, but once they are in business, how will they operate? Now, I believe what the gentleman said, that they will operate in good faith and do what they say they're going to do. But how do you, as a neighbor, if we feel that the dogs are barking too much, what's the level? Who says it's barking too much? Who gauges whether something is too loud or not? There is no standard for that. How can you make a standard for that? And I live next door to the man that owns the property that came all the way from Westminster here, and I think he made a great point. It's not the loudness, it's the constant sound of dogs barking. And when we moved into our house 15 years ago, I walked in the backyard to hear what I could hear before we bought the house, deciding if I wanted to buy the house. What could I hear? I heard a lot of noise, Broadway, C470, but on other days, I don't hear a lot of that decibel 90 noise or whatever they call it. But when the wind blows in certain directions, you can hear everything. So some days are good, some days are bad. I think you will always hear noise from dogs, but I think some days you're really going to hear the noise.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Did you see where they're?
Good evening, and we're all going to go home soon. My name's Chris Duke. I live at 8195 South Logan Court. We've lived there for 32 years. We've raised our children there, and our neighborhood now is a beautiful combination of active, retired people and beautiful, young, growing families. And I don't know if anybody's lived next to 2 or more dogs. We have. The stench is horrible. You can't even go out and enjoy your yard. I'd also like to ask this young lady, when they close up at night, who's there to hear the dogs bark or keep them quiet? You know, they're barking all night. So I agree with everything everybody said, but I've lived next to a lot of dogs, and it's not good. And the traffic's bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm still Pam Chadbourne, and I live a block and a half from here. I don't think I said before. I just wanted to remark on how well-spoken and these folks were and how well they represented people in Littleton. But I've been coming to Planning Commission meetings for a long time, and what I know is a lot of people don't show up because they just don't have the confidence in the community and the support these folks do. And I'm going to tell you, in my neighborhood, people feel discouraged. They've had an interaction with code enforcement or something like that, or tried to build a shed, and it didn't work, and they say, I'm not going to deal with Littleton city government. They don't trust our government here. These folks are strong and powerful, and they have money. But I think you've heard before that some neighborhoods near Columbine Square or downtown here, they're renters. They do not have confidence. They don't own their homes. They can be kicked out by their landlord at any moment. If they come and speak about something in their neighborhood, they're afraid of getting dislodged, and there's no place to go. It's hard to find rentals here. So what you've heard tonight is great, and I think representative of Littleton, and you don't hear it about most applications, but this is what zoning is for. And you don't trust the applicant's stuff. We heard the staff member actually say, I use their report. And I've criticized this before. Traffic studies brought in by the applicant are not worth anything. The city must have its own independent knowledge. So let me just make that point that you've heard lots of applications, not this articulate response, but I guarantee you that these neighbors for each application have the same concerns translated to the situation. We should respect our zoning much more than we do. We're about to change it, and that's a huge mistake without understanding the weaknesses and strengths of our zoning. So please consider what you've heard and how this reflects on this zoning change that we're supposed to do. This is the truth, not the little paragraphs and drawings that our staff has brought. Actually, most of them don't bring drawings. It's just paragraphs of words that mean nothing and can be gotten around in a trice. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I don't need to speak.
No.
Have you noted that I'm against it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing. Does the applicant wish to make any closing statements?
I can very much appreciate the concerns of the neighbors, and I really understand where they're coming from. I would like to state a few things about a lot of the comments that have been said tonight. Some of the comments were not directed towards Hobnob facilities, nor were some of the people who were speaking and complaining living against a Hobnob facility. Some of the people who were here speaking had issues with other facilities. That needs to be clear. And there wasn't clarity within some of that. As far as the studies, we have provided a traffic study. The traffic study is done by a third-party engineer who is also using industry standards. And all of that stuff basically shows that Hobnob Picker will have a reduction in traffic compared to what a restaurant would have. So in the long run, there will be potentially less traffic.
Excuse me, please. Go ahead.
Also, there's a few other things that certainly could be addressed. The sound study as well, it's done with industry standard calculations. I understand people feel that's a bias. We are not manipulating that data. That data is provided by third-party engineers, and it is brought to the city, evaluated by the city's engineers and staff, and the traffic study was approved showing a reduction. We tried to do a neighborhood meeting. Very few people showed up. We did receive some positive information from that. And as well, there's a lot of car noise along these streets. As a lot of the people who've spoken this evening have stated, there's a lot of noise from C470. And we are not trying to make that worse. Carrie has a very good product and she really works hard to try to maintain her business model. She's not going to come up here and misrepresent something. And, you know, as also stated, there's a lot of dogs in this neighborhood. So, you know, and sewer gas smells, potentially from that restaurant, we will be removing the grease trap. So there will not be any more sewer gas smells when we are done with construction. Carrie, do you have anything else?
Yes, I want to again say thank you for the opportunity to present my business. I just want to make a couple of comments. We have never received any complaints from the City of Lakewood or the City of Greenwood Village or any of our neighbors regarding our operations, specifically when it comes to noise and odors, which is what most people are concerned with here this evening. And those are things which we have control over and which we can address. So I just want to make it clear in the 11 years of operation, 11 years at one location, 6 years at our second location, we've never received a complaint from our neighbors. We are surrounded by residents, other businesses, restaurants, grocery stores, child daycares, lots of different businesses that would be negatively impacted if we had lots of noise and odors emanating from our facility. So I think I would certainly invite everybody here to come and visit one of our facilities and see for themselves that you don't have bad odors. You can walk right up to the play yard area. You don't smell anything. You don't have 150 dogs barking, which I think people get stuck on that number. They hear 150 dogs at our facility and they think, oh gosh, they're all going to be barking at the same time, and that just doesn't happen. But I certainly invite everyone to come and meet with us and take a tour of our facility and see for themselves. And I think that would be the best source of information. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to next portion of our meeting, which is a motion and a vote. Does anybody want to tackle a motion? Someone? No? Well, everybody just looking down at their pads. Anybody want to make a motion? Craig, we'll let you.
Looking for the motion. Of course, my pad freezes up. Okay. All right, there we go. I move to approve PC Resolution 01-2020, recommending approval of the proposed Second Amendment to a general plan development for Highland Square Oak Brook Commercial Center Plan Development Plan.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion. We can go up and down. Jason, you were second. Go ahead.
Certainly. I actually had a question for the city attorney. Some of the testimony in one of the emails referenced the section on animals under the police powers of the code, I believe section 6-2-6. And I was wondering about the applicability of that section of the code to a licensed animal facility versus, say, a residence.
Yeah, theoretically it would be applicable, although it's a little more difficult to enforce that when dealing with a animal care facility, because you're actually looking for the dog that is the culprit, that is the one doing it, as opposed to multiple ones. So there are other abilities to control the noise coming from a facility. 10.4.15, which is the regulations that govern the animal care and boarding facilities, have specifications as it relates to making sure that they're controlling noises and odors, nuisances, things along those lines. Also, there's the general noise prohibited section, which is 7-3-6, which started getting into those different DBA standards depending on your zoning district.
Thank you. Okay. Right, so I will say that the applicant, I think, has done an excellent job of describing their operations and addressing concerns related to odors, and the traffic study, according to applicant and I think staff's analysis, also indicated that this will actually generate less traffic than a residence. And if you go look at the trip generation tables by the Institute of Traffic Engineers, you'll find that these types of facilities do generate less traffic than a comparably sized restaurant. So I found that very compelling. I think the concern is largely about the noise, and the PUD was deliberately created to restrict more impactful uses on the southeast corner of the development site. In fact, one of the illustrations I saw showed it as a 2-story office building, which has far less activity than, say, a drive-through, a 24-hour use, or even a doggy daycare with outside uses. So although I seconded the motion, I may be inclined to vote against the motion based on those concerns, and I would specifically cite Section 10-2-23B5, which discusses that the nature of intent and intensity of development must be supported by adequate transportation and open space to serve the development and to minimize impacts on adjacent, existing, and future development. And it's really about those impacts that I have concerns. Also have a concern with the South Area Plan, which describes in the land use policies concerns about impacts on nearby residents.
Bruce.
Okay, based upon the evidence presented tonight, I find as follows. I respect a lot of what Jason said. I think with respect to the amendment criteria in referencing 10-2-23, I'm not finding that this is a more creative or effective use of the land in public or private services to accommodate changes in land development technology, so forth and so on. The innovative redevelopment of uses to meet contemporary needs of the community by providing a greater mix of uses, including those which may coexist on the same parcel, is also a question in my mind, based again on the evidence presented. I also agree with Jason in terms of the South Neighborhood Plan that is stated in the staff information. Residential areas be protected from commercial development by utilizing a combination of setback buffers, screening, and other measures to reduce visual and audible impacts created by the development. That seems to be potentially an issue or a variety of issues at question. As such, while I likewise commend the applicant, I think he made a terrific presentation, and I think it'd be wonderful to have you in Littleton. I think the location you've selected for this is suboptimal, and as such, I'm going to not be able to support the motion. Thank you.
I am in agreement with the other two commissioners.
David.
All right. Well, I kind of just hearing, I guess, reading the packet and hearing from council, I think I'm approaching this maybe from a little bit different.
Thank you.
Approaching this from a little bit different angle. I think the applicant did a great job presenting the, their case, and I'm thinking about the noise and the odor, and hearing from the applicant, I'd be inclined to be in favor of this motion. My understanding, though, is we're really not looking at the noise or the odor in this at this stage. That's more for the conditional use permit. Looking at the 10-2-23 criteria, I might also lean towards approving the motion because it seems to meet all of the criteria here. But the thing that is overriding to me is the agreement that the original developer had with the community, and went so far as to codify that in the zoning. And I just don't feel like I can override the, it doesn't rise to the level of a deed restriction, but it's still there. And I can't just ignore that, that intent. And I think that, just based on that primarily, I'm likely going to vote against the motion.
Okay, my turn.
Your turn, Greg.
Well, yeah, this is a very interesting and difficult case to hear. It's obviously a commercial center that's been underperforming for a long time. I've lived in Littleton for more than 20 years, and I'm fortunately seen the turnover of businesses here, and vacant stores are not good for the community or the neighborhood either. Adaptive reuse is encouraged, and I think can be good. And obviously, dog daycare centers and dog care centers in general, especially when they're well-run, are in demand. These business owners have demonstrated to me that they can run a facility that has minimal disturbances on the neighborhood. We heard significant concerns from the neighborhood about noise, smell, traffic, and so on, and I think those are all legitimate concerns. The concerns about traffic and the noise studies, I believe the studies that were done were fairly objective and I think credible. But ultimately, to me, this application comes down to the fact that it's based on one business's development, and this is a rezoning. And a rezoning could result in another business taking that over later on. And not knowing what that could be, it kind of opens up potentials. And I think ultimately for me, it comes down to what one of the gentlemen who spoke said, the desire to be sensitive to the adjacent neighborhood. And for that reason, it would be difficult for me to support this application.
Jerry?
I felt like the staff did a good job presenting the information and making the analysis that a lot of the project or the proposed amendment does follow and meet most of the criteria. However, I don't feel that it meets the spirit of the comprehensive plan that we just went through and all the feedback that we got on that. And again, you've all noted all the concerns that I also agree with around basically the quality of the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood. Citizen involvement is a huge aspect of the plan we talked about. We want people to come and tell us what you think, and you did. I think it sounds like a wonderful business and a wonderful business model. However, I don't feel this is an appropriate location for it. We would love to have you somewhere in Littleton, but I think we have to respect that original zoning, the intent of the original developer and the development, and so I would be opposed to this amendment.
Okay. I also want to thank staff for a comprehensive packet of material, easily understood, although lengthy. Also thank the applicant, good presentation. You obviously have a good business. Also, I want to thank the community for sticking around and their comments. It's good to see involvement. It's nice to see a crowd here at Planning Commission meetings. Sometimes we're 2 or 3 or none. Let's see. Dog noises, well, start with the nuts and bolts. The buffer, the embankment, yes, we'll cut down on dog noise. There are other mitigation that they're going to be doing that will cut down the noise. Traffic, I think somebody mentioned the restaurant would create more traffic than this facility. I agree with that. I always say that it's only the last development in any neighborhood that creates all the traffic problems. It's not what preceded it. Also, the same goes for views. It's always the last development that hinders views. Of course, when your house was built, you blocked somebody else's view. Dog noises are steady, and they're piercing. We all know, well, none of us know what a a generator from 3 blocks away, what the decibel level is of that, but I think as community members, we're all experts on the noises of dogs. A PDC, somebody mentioned in the audience, a PDC requires that allowed uses be defined, negotiated, and agreed to by the city, the residents, and the developer. The uses are part of what you might call a pact, an agreement that the city and the community can count on. So there is a pact here from the, I think, the 80s that I think takes precedence over all else. And a change in the allowed uses must have at least a modest degree of support from the surrounding community. This application virtually has none or very little. So I agree with all the references to the South Neighborhood Plan, the city codes that other commissioners made. This project cannot receive my support. Are there any other comments? And we are dangerously close to our 10 o'clock shut-off. So no other comments? Time to vote. Don't look. All set. Sorry? No. Down is no.
The vote is 0 in favor, failed unanimously.
We are still in session, so if you are leaving, please leave quietly because we have a little bit of other business to take care of. So we'll give you a second to vacate the hall. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Okay. I'm sorry?
Chairman Rudnicki?
Yes.
For those audience members that are still here, I would like to recommend that this is going to a council hearing. This is a recommendation, so there will be one more public hearing on this case.
Did you understand that? We are advisory to council. This will be going to council.
March 3rd? March 3rd, right? Yep.
That is the tentatively scheduled date.
I'm sure you will. Okay, staff, any?
Good evening.
And
how are you? Is everyone still awake? I just have a couple things I wanted to just give an update on. We will be officially kicking off the Unified Land Use Code on February 10th. Brett Keast will be here speaking. He will be at the Town Hall Art Center. This is the only time that we'll be using the Town Hall Art Center because the museum was not available. All of their speaker series will be at the museum. So that is kicking off on the 10th. That is typically one of your meeting dates. So we're actually going to do a joint study session with council on Tuesday, February 11th. At that one, we'll have Brett Keast there. He'll be talking about the whole process that we'll be going through. And we'll also take some time to discuss the code, the proposed code changes that we have on tap. We were this evening supposed to discuss floodplain ordinance and the design standards, but I'm guessing you all probably don't want to do that. Yes? We've done a little research, and on our side, we can accommodate a special meeting next Monday, February 3rd, in the community room and do the study session for the floodplain ordinance as well as the design standards at that time.
let me give the commission a choice here. We can extend the meeting tonight, or everyone will show up next week for our special meeting. What's your preference?
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah, and it,
Do we have unanimous next week?
Aye.
Aye, okay. We'll agree to getting out of here before our 10 o'clock
excellent.
time and meet next Monday. What else do you have?
Is that 6:30 next Monday?
Yeah.
Yes, and again, it's just a study session. It's not a special meeting. It's just a special date to do that. So I apologize that this ran late this evening, and I apologize that we brought Rita in to infect you all. So yes, I do have just a few talking points that we put together as a communications piece on the code update. So I just wanted, thank you, Wendy, you'll do that. And I am hoping next Monday we will also have the schedule for basically the next 18 months with the visits with Kendall Keast. So I will share that with you. We had to change a few things. There were a few conflicts in the dates that they gave us. So hopefully we'll have that.
That's it?
Mike, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner comments? I think we're all buttoning up and ready to go home.
Question, just clarification. So on the kickoff on the 11th, did you say February 11th? And then there's the 10th. So we'll have our meeting here on the 10th, which is a Monday, right?
No.
Oh, that's Tuesday.
No, we will not have the meeting on the 10th to give you guys the opportunity to go to the speaker series on the 10th and hear Brett Keith speak.
ACC.
It will be at the Town Hall Arts Center. And the actual,
It'll be a joint session. At what
a
time?
joint session on Tuesday. That will be at 6:30 at a regularly scheduled city council study session.
I thought I heard breakfast, so I was thinking it was morning. All right.
Well, we can accommodate you.
All right. Love breakfast at night.
Serve
Bacon
breakfast
social.
anytime.
You can get Egg McMuffin 24 hours a day.
I'll have waffles.
I vote we put Mr. Coronado in charge of food.
We'll have it catered by the Bacon Social Club.
Right.
Whoa, your dime. Okay, is that it for you?
Yes.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments? I have none. We are adjourned. Thank you for your patience this evening.
Yes.
You probably stole it, so.
I probably did.
Yeah. Next thing you'll probably.